around 70 participants in the hall now.
Sir, in the entire digital platform or the flow, if someone are
actually they are sitting in the hall. Some of them have logged in through their cell phone and some of them have not, because it is buffering, no?
Yes.
That is
what is the number? What is the number?
Around 70. 70.
70?
Yes.
70. Then, so thank you, Anjan sir. Let me take up the floor. And very good afternoon to all the participants here. My topic of discussion will be on data, because data is a very common thing that all of us know, and very frequently we use it in all researches, whether it is social science research or business research or it is natural science. And as Anjan sir was giving the introduction about the theme we are going to discuss today, he has already hinted that we have already collected our data during our MPhil stage, and some of you might have completed your data collection at this stage also of the PhD stage. But let me again just make you navigate through the process of data sources and databases. When we talk about data, everyone deals with data, not only the researchers. In our everyday life, we also deal with data, because when someone asks you, how many people are in your locality, how many households, we say this is the number of households that is in the locality. That is also a data. And data therefore refers to any, what you say, information or any fact or any figure from which we draw a conclusion. Suppose I gave you the locality and the household. The number of household is an information, and it is also a figure that this number of figures are households are in this locality. So this is the data which all of us we are doing, and it is a collective recording of our observations, either through numerical or in a numerical way, and which is we call data. So any numerical figure, and sometimes it is not only numerical figure, it goes much beyond that. Any information can also be treated as a data. Suppose I am giving a description about something that is also a data. So therefore, data can be defined as any quantitative or qualitative value of a variable. Suppose I ask you that, can you just anyone tell me that what is your topic of research? Anyone from social science background? Because I am a person from social science, I can better deal with social science, I think. Anyone who will be telling me what is your topic? Yes, dear participants. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. You are audible.
Yes. Sir, any participant can give me, anyone can volunteer to talk about your topic on which you collected data so that we can take it up.
Yes, ma'am. Let me ask. Someone wants to ask.
Anyone want to?
What is data?
The next slide.
Relating to your topic on which you are collecting the data, can anyone, or you have already collected the data? Sir, shall I carry ahead otherwise?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please get it.
Okay. So suppose you are doing a study on the socio-economic background of a particular village or some of people of a village. So what you do when you are collecting a socio-economic information, there you try to collect around certain parameters. We take certain variables such as the gender, then the caste, the religion, then the marital status, then their level of education, their occupation, their income, their property sources, the nature of property, the nature of family, all these are the variables. And for all the variables, when we collect the information about these variables, we get a value for this variable. Suppose in a village, I say that there are 4 different castes, that is the general caste, the OBC, the scheduled caste, and if we say the scheduled tribes are also there. It is a heterogeneous village. So many households belong to the Brahmin caste, and so many households belong to the Kshatriya house. So here, if caste is a variable, then we get a value for it during our survey. And this value against the variable is known as our data. Am I clear to all of you? For example, income. If you are talking about income, you take 3 or 4 categories that income up to, suppose I am asking about the monthly income of these households. Suppose I say the monthly income is within 10,000, more than 10,000 to 30,000, more than 30,000 to 50,000, or more than 50,000. And the income is the variable. Then we make a classification of the variables and we get a value how many households fall into it. And that is the data we are collecting. So data is sometimes also the value that we get for the variable. In parametric study, we take different variables that we collect, make a survey, and after analysis, we get a value. And that value is known as the data. And the information itself is also a data. And is a plural. Datum means a single information, and datum is a series of information or a series of values. And data is also thought because from data is so critical to a research that from that we start all analysis. After seeing the data, we go for analysis, and from the analysis we go for inferences. The set of inferences actually become the conclusion of our research. So any type of research is highly data dependent because on the data, many things depend. What are the things? First of all, we get the raw data. And from the raw data, what we do, we put the raw data, we make a data reporting. After the data reporting is made, according to a skeleton, that skeleton is known as your tabular expression. And from the tables, you make an interpretation. And from the interpretation, you develop an inference, and that draw an inference. And they together, the inferences together constitute the conclusion of your research. So data is the bottom line or the lowest unit from which everything, the entire research process is built up, and the research is giving a logical conclusion. Then the second thing we will be discussing that what is data? Why we need data at all? We need data because in any type of research, the data is the most important thing and integral thing, because without data, the research cannot make a forward move or a backward move. So what happens? Data actually is the driver of research, number one. Number two is that in any comparative research, suppose we are making a research between a metropolis and a general common township, then what happens? Or a rural or an urban area. When we make the comparison, we take different values. For example, what are the sources of income? What are the different occupations? What is the living standard of the people? What is the expenditure pattern? What is the purchasing power of the people? And for everything, you make a comparison so that you can you get the value and put it. And for rural and for the urban. And there, what you make a comparative study. Then the second thing, the data is also required when we make a re-study or a follow-up study. Now the question arises, what is a re-study and what is a follow-up study? Suppose we may ourselves or somebody else has conducted a study, and after that, the results, we want to see that whether the results are accurate or not. Then we launch our study and we find if the discrepancy level in the data is not that much, then the restudy, we can say in the restudy, the data is confirmed. Otherwise, we may also go for substituting the data, or we may go for substituting a part of it. And in the follow-up study, yes, well, again, in the follow-up study, in a follow-up study, what happens? The sound is coming actually. So, sir, in a follow-up study, what happened? In researches, we have sometimes a very long or longitudinal study. What we do in many intervals. For example, many of the developmental studies are longitudinal in nature, because in development, how do we take a design that is known as the pre and post facto design, and in the pre-facto design, we say before industrialization in a particular place, what was the state of affairs? Then secondly, after the industrialization, what changes has taken place? So there, it is a follow-up study we take up. And there we find if there are some positive changes, we say industrialization has a good effect on the local community. But if we find that the negative impacts actually outweigh the positive impacts, then we say, no, it doesn't have a much impact on the particular local community. Then there is the reanalysis, and sometimes we also make a comparison with the secondary analysis. Already some reports are there, and we go ourselves to make the study. We get new data, and that data may be having some contradiction with the existing data. That is called secondary analysis. And sorry, that is the reanalysis we are making. But secondary analysis is that we may not be taking the primary data. हमें field जाए नहीं, हमें कौन करे जो secondary data था, secondary data may also come from different sources, and sometimes in the internet sources there are overlapping of data, and there are also data contradictions. Then we compare the secondary literature, and from that also we make an analysis that is called secondary analysis. Then the third is that when we just launch a pilot survey. And when we launch a pilot survey, there also we collect the data. Before the launching of the actual study, we launch a pre-study, what we say, a pre-study, that is known as pilot study. In the pilot study, again, we do it to decide upon the research design. Should I go for an exploratory design, or should I go for a descriptive design? Should I go for a diagnostic design, or I will go for what is called an experimental design? ତେଣୁ ଆମେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ରିସର୍ଚ୍ଚ କେମିତି କରିବା, ତା ଡିଜାଇନ କ'ଣ କରିବା, and how to determine the methodological pathway of our research, ଆମେ କ'ଣ methodology ନବା, ସେଥିପାଇଁ ମଧ୍ୟ ଆମେ data collect କରିଥାଉ, because the data itself gives us a direction to decide, number one, the research design that we are going to adopt for our actual study, and the methodological pathway that we are going to accept or to adopt for our study. Then the next is that data also, we need data for the replication of the published statistics. Many times the statistics, there exists some prima facie statistics, but we have to again renew it from time to time, because if you find that the census data every 10 years, the census data is changing. Similarly, groundwater report, resource data, all this data go on changing. Many environmental reports give us a bulk of information, but that bulk of information, for example, the forest coverage, it is also changing, and somewhere it is growing, and in many places it is the forest coverage is declining. So the production, agricultural production in a particular year, the production may be going up, and in some particular years it is also coming down. So that statistics also requires data. And for teaching and learning, because the classroom, when we teach theory, theories are to be sufficed by data, and that is the need where we have to take up collect data for enriching our teaching and learning. Then next we will be talking about what is the nature of data, and that as you know, all of us in social sciences, we know that there are two types of data. One is the qualitative data and the other is the quantitative data. So qualitative, there is a saying, I will say, that not everything counts that can be counted. So there are many things that actually count for a situation. Whatever situation ପାଇଁ ବହୁ ଜିନିଷ ଅଛି, କିନ୍ତୁ ସବୁ ଜିନିଷକୁ ଗଣି ହୁଏ ନାହିଁ. So what is the solution to that? We have to take a qualitative data. We have to depend on qualitative data there. For example, I give you some people who might be making a study on tribal witchcraft, or somebody may be doing on folklores. All these things, there is no countable measure for them. And for that, we need on the narratives, and that is the qualitative data. And qualitative data is that data that is descriptive, not in the form of statistical description, but in the form of narration. It depicts the qualities and characteristics, and it basically describes the attributes. Ame bahut samare amara values, amara belief system, amara faith, amara trust, all these things cannot be put into counts or measures. But these things, to a great extent, they count for what we do. Our actions are conditioned upon many things. Our socialization process, the beliefs, the values, the customs, the traditions, all these things. But these things are beyond counting. Therefore, we take the qualitative data there. And in this case, what happens? Qualitative data is based more on the interpretativist paradigm. In research, we have two paradigms. One is rather three paradigms, I will say. The first is the positivist paradigm. The positivist paradigm in research, in particularly social science research, I will say this is a paradigm or approach to research which believes in the scientific nature of research. And this paradigm tries to bring a proximity between social science research pattern and the natural science research pattern. So it is more based on what you say, observation, experimentation, comparison, and data plays an important role because it values what you say, the value pre-observation, predictability, validity, neutrality, all these things. But the other part of it is that it is the interpretativist paradigm where we totally depend on interpretation many times, and there we depend on observation, but here we depend on interpretation, what they tell us and how we will interpret that in our observation. For example, when we are going to study the prisoners in a jail, in the prisoners, how many dresses you get, how many times food you get, what quality of food you get, all these things we can measure and we can write. But when we say, what is your sentiment, or what is, or how do you feel in the four walls of the prison, that we cannot count. For that, we need the qualitative data. And for qualitative data, we have to sit with them together, we can take their case studies, and we can listen to the narratives they say, and from the narratives, from the case studies, whatever we get, we have to transcript and interpret it. And that is the interpretativist paradigm. And qualitative data is basically retrieved through what is called grounded theory, thematic analysis, and content analysis or narrative analysis. I will be telling you what are these theories, because how we can get the qualitative data. After we get the data, the question of interpretation comes. So I will be coming to that, but let me make a hint upon little bit on the quantitative data. Quantitative data is very easy to collect. It is basically numerical in character. In number speaks. Here in quantitative data, number speaks, and in qualitative data, the voice speaks. So there are two different things, qualitative and quantitative. And quantitative data is based on the positivist paradigm. As I told you, it is basically based on the observation, the experimentation, the comparison that we make. And mathematical techniques such as mean, median, standard deviations, linear regressions are used to get quantitative, to make quantitative data analysis. And qualitative data is also concretized by quantitative data, because many times the post-positivist paradigm, at the third paradigm I will be telling you, the positivist paradigm is basically taking the natural science approach and saying that everything should be counted. But the interpretativist thing says that no, everything cannot be counted, so they have to be interpreted from the voices people give. For example, knowledge cannot be actually counted, and knowledge has to be measured, and that measurement is based on interpretation of the ideas people narrate through their stories. And the third paradigm is known as the post-positivist paradigm. That means a fine blend of what you say, the positivist paradigm and interpretativist paradigm. In many of the social science researches, now we are using what is called the post-positivist paradigm, that is a quant-qual. Yes. Anyone who wants to ask any question? So what we want to see is that we make quantitative as well. Yes. Yes.
Since we are having technical issues, so all the clarification session we will keep at the end of your talk. Is that okay, ma'am?
At the end? Yes, yes. I will go ahead with the description of the presentation. Yeah. Okay.
Please.
So the next we are coming, I told you, I will be telling what is grounded theory and what is thematic analysis and what is content analysis or narrative analysis. So grounded theory, normally we use many times grounded theory in social science research. And grounded theory is a qualitative method that enables us to study a particular phenomenon or process and discover new theories that are based on the collection and analysis of the real world data. For example, it is based on, as I will say, an inductive method. We do not deduce from an existing theory and go for research, but on the basis of research, we develop a theory. So it is thus the reverse of that. In many of the social science researches, we take a theoretical strain, and from the theoretical strain, we take the deductive method. There, we do not use the grounded theory actually. In grounded theory, absolutely theoretical strain or theoretical backdrop is absent. What we see from the scenario down in the field, from that, we collect the information and data. On the basis, we develop a theory that is called the grounded theory, because from ground the theory develops. It is not a top-down approach, but it is a bottom-up approach. The second thing is thematic analysis. If I talk about the thematic analysis, it is again a qualitative method, and this here data is relating to opinions, thoughts, feelings, and other descriptive information. So what happens, we just ask them, we give them the theme and we ask them, what are your feelings about it? Suppose we are making an evaluation of a policy. Suppose I tell you that I will give you a very good example here. Many times we find that we make a policy, but we see only the positive thing of it, because we go with a mindset and with a subjective bias that the policy must be very much impacting the local people or a rural pocket or a tribal pocket, whatever tribal terrain, whatever pocket, whatever it is. But sometimes it so happens that the policy may be having a very, very Papadhandi, where they are the water deficit blocks of the district. And there we found that the water scarcity occurs not only because of water deficit, but because of the quality of water. Both quantity and quality counts for water scarcity and water stress. And in one of the villages, we had taken 8 villages, and from one of the villages, one lady told us that here, and it was again confirmed by the other women and adolescent girls of the age of this adolescent girl, that amar eti pani kon hochi na pani jogu ame dekhuchu amar bahagara pai gote problem hochi. So we asked them, is it to obfuscate the marriage, bahagara jo cultural function ta kariya pai pani nahlar asubidha hochi? Se kol na, se katha nui. Ammo garu jhiyo nava pai kehi raji honanti. So again, it was a matter of very astonishment for us. We asked them, kahiki kon asubidha heichi? Tanka pani re बहुत फ्लोराइड आसुची एवं आयरन रिच तांकर सब दांत गुडाकर कला पड़ी जाउची फ्लोराइड फ्लोरक्स एलिमेंट तेन दांत कला पड़ी गला से माने कहउछन हम काहागरे कथा पे हमको लागुची हमको से माने गोटे तांकर सेल्फ असेस बॉडी सेमिंग आसुची आ जो माने आसुचंती दांत कला ही जाउची बोली केही बाहा पे राजी होनांती. So just look at it, these things cannot be taken from an observation की count करिकिरी. realize माने आमे तांको water depend होची जाई जाई आमे एठारे पहुंचिलु. So when you ask them water deficit or water stress से कहले दीटा quantity केते जगह रे ground water level कमी गलारु हम घर पाखरे कोनोसी water bodies नथिबारु किंतु आउ गोटे होची water थाई कि मध्य क्वालिटी ता जेते बेले इते rotten quality water आछि हम पाइका health hazards आछि. This is a cultural hazard that is coming to us. तेणु ए सब जिंस देखिया पे गले these are the qualitative methods मु कहथिली grounded theory, thematic analysis कहथिली गोटे कहथिली content analysis. बहुत समय रे हमें secondary data रु मध्य हमें कोन करू रिसर्च करिथाउ. secondary data रु जेतले रिसर्च करू हमें गोटे particular theme ऊपर हमें देखू कंटेंट एनालिसिस करू. जो माने रिसर्च आपण माने करिसंती दीटा जिंस एठी हमु कहिबी केमती डेटा हमको हेल्प करे कंटेंट एनालिसिस करिया पे. एनी थीम यू टेक सपोज सेता बेले तार मीडिया रे को मीडिया रे ता विषय रे बाहरी छी सब मीडिया नबा आमे गोटे टाइम कोहॉर्ट नबा आमे एति की वर्ष माने करे इंपैक्ट ऑफ कोविड सेता बेले आमे कोन करिबा ए कोविड जेते बेले आरंभ हला 2020 मार्च onwards 20th March 2020 to 2022 जाइका ऑलमोस्ट आमे फेब्रुआरी जाय जति देखिबा बहुत गोटे कोविड ऊपर बाहर छी मैक्सिमम को टाइम रे बाहर छी आमे से टाइम कोहॉर्ट भीतर नउचे जेते बेले बाहर छी आमे देखते लॉकडाउन पीरियड रे जेते बेले कोविड वाज एट इट्स क्लाइमैक्स तार इंपैक्ट कोन कोन विभिन्न पेपर रे बाहर छी तार इंपैक्ट केमिति सोशल लाइफ ऊपर पड़ी छी आमे ताकू ही नै कि जेते बेले एनालिसिस करे आमे को मीडिया हाउस को नबा केतेटा नबा लोकल मीडिया नबा केतेटा नेशनल मीडिया नबा ताकू नै कि जेते बेले एनालाइज करूचे we can get a very good data on the impact of COVID. ताकू से data को नै interpret करी we can write our thesis and that is called what is called content analysis. बहुत समय रे आपण माने देखिथिबे we make जेतोले review of literature chapter आपण माने करिथिबे review of literature chapter रे मु सबु बेले पिला मानन को कहे रिसर्चर मानन को you go for a meta analysis ता ए कंटेंट एनालिसिस ऊपर बेस हमें जत्ते गोटे रिव्यू करू तार जदी थेमेटिक मेटा एनालिसिस करूचे and we can publish a paper on meta analysis the citation level goes up काहे कि ना citation level बढ़ी जाए काहे कि ना सेते बेले सेचरे हमें इत्ते गोटे जिंस रो नै थाउ तार कंटेंट इत्ते रिच थाए people go for citing that. So our citation level mu sabu bale researcher mango ethi bi platform re koibi those who are researchers please do go for a meta analysis paper during your research tenure because that will give you rich dividend in terms of your reads and citations and impact factor will go on. And I will tell you another 4 methods. One is basically semiotic, discourse or deconstruction, narrative analysis. Literature रे बहुत समय रे गुडा करा जे सोशल साइंस रे हमें देखो बहुत समय सिंबल को नै करी माने कर सौरा आर्ट तक नै करी जने करला ताकर तार आर्ट रो जो ताको इंटरप्रेट करिबा ताको जो सिंबल ताको साइन ताको हमें इंटरप्रेट करू ताको को सेमियोटिक एनालिसिस जत्ते बेले हमें गोटे लिटरेचर पीस को नै करी ताको इंटरप्रेट करू सेटा भी गोटे डेटा हम पई हुए that is based on interpretative analysis that is a qualitative data that is called deconstruction or discourse analysis. तापरे लास्ट टा कहबी narrative analysis बहुत समय रे मन कर गोटे क्लाइमेट चेंज ऊपर हमें गोटे काम करूचे जते बेले क्लाइमेट चेंज काम करूचे क्लाइमेट चेंज ता हमको किए कहि परिबो जते बेले हमें क्लाइमेट चेंज गोटे यंग पिला को पचले से हां कहि दबो नै वर्षा कमी छी किंतु जदि हमें तीनटा जनरेशन दबा गोटे ओल्डेस्ट माने oldest generation माने living generation तांको नबा they have seen the witness the change in a very good manner ଆଉ ସେମାନେ ତାଙ୍କର କହିବାଟା narrative ରେ କହି परिबे आगे आमे एमती घर करथुलु एबे एई रकम घर करछु हम फूड हैबिट एया थिला बर्तमान मो फूड हैबिट हेतला एई समय रे वर्षा आसला एई समय रे रुआ होतला एति के प्रोडक्शन होतला वर्तमान होनी सो वी कैन गेट अ वेरी गुड एनालिसिस सेटा होची तांका नैरेटिव्स को नेकी हमें इंटरप्रेट कले दैट इज अगेन अ डेटा so data can be both qualitative and data can be also quantitative तापरे हमें जदि tools of data collection को आसीबा we will come to the next one that is the tools I mean quantitative data analysis पाइका we normally use सर्वे कोठी आमे गोटे गांव को जाउचे जाई कि घर घर बुलुचे सर्वे करूचे कि विभिन्न जगार गोटे ब्लॉक रो सब स्कूल जाई डेटा आनुचे दैट इज कॉल्ड द सर्वे आमे गोटे या पई सर्वे टूल टे तयारी करू जोटा कि गोटे इंटरव्यू शेड्यूल भले होते आमे जाऊ तांको पचारि लेखु किबा रेकॉर्ड रो बाहर करी लेखु सेटा होचे क्वांटिटेटिव डाटा सर्वे आ क्वेश्चन आर होचे बहुत समय लोक माने बिजी थांती गोटे कॉर्पोरेट को आमे स्टडी करूचे किंबा गोटे पॉलिटिशियन मान को स्टडी करचे who have a very busy life work life and for them they are literate population we can send them the questionnaire and interview schedule survey our interview schedule ta bhi अनेक समय रे हमें सर्वे रे यूज करू सर्वे रे किंतु सेंसस सर्वे रे हमें इंटरव्यू माने जन को पूरा डिटेल पचनी इंटरव्यू शेड्यूल ले टिके मोर डिटेल्स पचरू आ स्ट्रक्चर्ड ऑब्जर्वेशन देन ऑब्जर्वेशन इज समथिंग मु कोन कली मु देखबी समस्तन को घरर मनकर लिविंग स्टैंडर्ड गोटे विलेज रे देखबी when I go to look at the living standard I have to take up a diary and write that is because my data that is also that will suffice my conclusions and that will suffice my research outcomes कारण सर्वे रे जेते बेले गोटे स्टैंडर्डाइज टूल करे आमे जेते बेले गोटे ऑब्जर्वेशन करू आमे गोटे स्टैंडर्डाइज टूल नै की करू and that becomes the structured observation या घर कोले मु कोन देखिबी मन कर मु देखिबी तांकर केतेटा तांकर घर को टाइप रो घर नंबर 2 देखिबी तांकर घरे कोन गैजेट्स अछि नंबर 3 देखिबी तांकर घरे केतेटा बाइक अछि नंबर 4 देखिबी तांकर घरर कोन माने केते जण मेंबर आ केते जण इनकम अर्नर so that all these things dependency rate काढी परिबी सेटा होची मोर माने structured observation बोली कहिबी आ existing databases रु भी मु बहुत समय रे नेबी existing बहुत गुडे डेटा सेकेंडरी डेटा थाए ताकू भी नै कि जदि मु एनालिसिस करली सेथुर भी मु बहुत गुडे क्वांटिटेटिव डेटा पाई फॉर एग्जांपल क्लाइमेट चेंज को नै कि मु मने कर रेनफॉल डेटा मु जदि देखिबी डिस्ट्रिक्ट गेजेटियर माने 1900 माने 1 रो आरंभ करी करी मन कर अच्छे आज जाइका डिस्ट्रिक्ट गेजेटियर रे प्रत्येक जदि हमें देखिबा वर्ष वाइज अछि सेटा को हमें सेकेंडरी डेटा भाबरे क्वांटिटेटिव डेटा किंतु सेटा बाय न्यूमेरिकल टर्म्स थाए सो दैट इज कॉल्ड क्वांटिटेटिव डेटा क्वालिटेटिव डेटा रो टूल गुडा को कोन ना फोकस ग्रुप डिस्कशन हमें गोटे होमोजेनियस ग्रुप नो 8 टा रो 12 टा तांको नै कि 5-6 टा क्वेश्चन करथो there is an that the researcher becomes a moderator there आउ जने के भी थिबो जदि से रेकॉर्ड करथबो and the researcher becomes the facilitator समस्त कहिबे ताकू नै कि तांकर जो नैरेटिव गुडा को आमे रेकॉर्ड करू सेटा हची फोकस ग्रुप अनस्ट्रक्चर्ड इंटरव्यू रे आमे पचार दो जेतले वयस्क लोकन पाखु जाऊ गोटे क्राफ्ट मरी जाउची मु से क्राफ्ट विषय डॉक्यूमेंट करिया पई चाहूची मने कर गोटे विच क्राफ्ट पाखो करली किबा गोटे लोकल हिलर पाखो करली ताको आ गोटे गोटे क्वेश्चन पचारी हुए नै ताको हमें गोटे क्वेश्चन पचार दो ब्लैंक क्वेश्चन आ वी गिव देम अ ब्लैंक अपॉर्चुनिटी दैट तुमे कहि चलो से जहा कहंते हमें रेकॉर्ड करे नो लेखि नो ताको आनी कि इंटरप्रेट करू दैट इज कॉल्ड क्वालिटेटिव डाटा आ गोटे होचे अनस्ट्रक्चर्ड ऑब्जर्वेशन अनस्ट्रक्चर्ड ऑब्जर्वेशन कोन ना ए ऑब्जर्वेशन ने किछ गोटे स्ट्रक्चर्ड फॉर्मेट न थाय स्टैंडर्डाइज्ड फॉर्मेट हमें ताको नै करी कोन करू ना हमर नीचे ताको ऑब्जर्वेशन को माने देखो एवं से जहा जहा पारू नै एस त पछरे हमें ताको कोन करू गोटे सिस्टमैटाइज्ड फॉर्मेट रे पक्को किंतु स्ट्रक्चर्ड ऑब्जर्वेशन गिव्स यू अ स्टैंडर्डाइज्ड रिजल्ट it is more it gives you quantitative data on unstructured रे descriptive माने quantitative data और descriptive data मिलिया भारी कष्ट हुए तेनो आमे सब बळे गोटे structured observation ପାଇଁ का चेष्टा करूछु एबे जिबा ପାଇଁ. Then we will come to the sources of data. There are basically two sources of data. One is the primary source and the second one is the secondary source. Primary source रे आमे कोन करछु आमे जोटा directly first hand information ता जाइकिरी field ru collect करू and it has got greater validity, objectivity, reliability. मन काहे की ना तार जो reliability थिबो secondary data नु केबे पाइबिनी मु एबे जो कहतले आमे नवरंगपुर रे जो स्टडी करथलो नवरंगपुर आमे जो रिपोर्ट देखिलु से जो रिपोर्ट रे आमे जहा देखिथिलु आ एक्चुअल सिनेरियो भीतर बहुत डाटा डिस्क्रिपेंसी रहिछि. So what I say that what you see through your own eyes through while collecting the data as a researcher, that is more valid, that is more objective and that is more reliable. Secondary data बहुत समय रे reliable हुए नहीं. The second one is the secondary data. Secondary data is the mined data. It कोट पाइबा आमे census रु पाइबा, NSS रु पाइबा, National Economic Survey ru पाइबा, State Economic Survey ru पाइबा, आमे Labor Department रो आमे विभिन्न डिपार्टमेंट रो एक्टिविटी रजिस्टर जो मैं रिपोर्ट बाहर से थ्रू भी बहुत डाटा पाइबा, इंडस्ट्री रो CSR विंग तारो कारे रिपोर्ट से थ्रू भी आमे डाटा पाइबा, केते अमाउंट खर्च होइछि, केते विलेज कवर होइछि, केते माने लोको बेनिफिटेड होइछन्ति, को टाइप रो काम होइछि, को टाइप रो डेवलपमेंटल वर्क होइछि. So these are all secondary data. किंतु आमे जदि देखिबा बहुत समय रे कॉन्ट्राडिक्टरी डेटा भी आमे पाई थाउ. ओवरलैपिंग डेटा थाए, कॉन्ट्राडिक्टरी डेटा थाए एवं तार ऑथेंटिसिटी इज सब्जेक्ट टू चैलेंज. फॉर एग्जांपल आमे गोटे कोन हुए ना टाइम स्पेस और स्पेसिस माने गोटे डेटा माने करो वर्ल्ड बैंक गोटे डेटा दउची जे this is the living standard of the people. किंतु से इथो गोटे वेस्टर्न कंट्री रो करी कि किंतु यदि अफ्रीकन कंट्री के एशियन कंट्री देखिबा the living standard of the people is not that is given from a western perspective. तेनो बर्तन होची लोकल सेंट्रिक डाटा रो बहुत माइक्रो डाटा में जोटा कहूचे तार बहुत इंपोर्टेंस रहिछि. We are more depending on the micro data rather than the macro data. Macro data may not fit into the micro data, but micro data together can be taken to make a macro data. For example, rate of urbanization हमें कहूचे rate of urbanization जदि हमें देखिबा developed country 1950s रो जदि देखिबा developed country रे जहा थिला ये ताटो अधिक हे गलानी developing country से rate of urbanization. तेनो आमे secondary data उपरे निर्भर कले मध्य प्राइमरी डाटा टाको रिसर्च रे बहुत प्राधान्य दउछु कारण प्राइमरी डाटा is a correction of many of the secondary data and it is the micro data and the micro data together make the macro data. Kintu macro data has least applicability in the local specific context and in the micro context. तापरे डाटा टाइप रे मु कहथले प्राइमरी रे हमें क्वांटिटेटिव आनी परिबा क्वालिटेटिव आनी परिबा हमें इको जो सोर्स गुडा का कहिथिली एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन ऑफ इंटरव्यू शेड्यूल क्वेश्चनर एटी गोटे दीटा पई कारण एगुडा का मु कहिछि क्वेश्चनर जोटा हमें पठौचे लिटरेट मास न पाखो इंटरव्यू शेड्यूल होचे जोटा हमें निजे रिसर्चर प्रेजेंट रहि के कलेक्ट करछि. बेसिकली इलिटरेट मास न पाखो जो डेटा आनो हमकु निजे रहिया पई पड़े. And interview schedule is always a preferred method कारण क्वेश्चनर बहुत समय रे फेरे नाही किंतु एबे हमें बहुत समय रे रिसर्च कलार माने गूगल फॉर्म रे मध्य करि के दउचंदी. गूगल फॉर्म रे हमें जोटा आनुचे that becomes more a questionnaire sort of thing. That out tool अछि जोटा कहते go along and get along. Go along हैला तंको संगे रे जाई कि मन करो वाटर समान जो वाटर घर टू वाटर कलेक्शन पॉइंट जाउछन्ती तांकर जो असुविधा होछि कलेक्शन पॉइंट घर को फैला केते वाटर वेस्टेज जाउछि केते तांको कष्ट होछि तांकर हाजार्ड्स कोन कोन रहुछि से एगुडा को सब आमे कैलकुलेट करि परिबा सो वी गो विथ द आमर रिसर्च पार्टिसिपेंट संगे मने कर आमे बहुत स्टडीज माइग्रेशन उपरे हेछि माइग्रेशन स्टडीज गुडा को बेसिकली आमे कोन करे ना माइग्रेंट वर्कर रोड नै जाय इधर एट द पॉइंट ऑफ डेस्टिनेशन और एट द पॉइंट ऑफ ओरिजिन किंतु आमे जदी ओरिजिन टू डेस्टिनेशन जिबा डेस्टिनेशन ने तांका संगे रहि के पुनी ओरिजिन को फेरिबा इट विल बी एन एथनोग्राफिक स्टडी नो डाउट अबाउट इट किंतु इट विल गिव अस अ वेरी रिच रिजल्ट जोटा कि से मानकर सिचुएशन चेंज हेले आमे जानि परिबानी जदि ओरिजिन ने पचरछ से माने कहिबे किंतु आम निचे रियलाइज करि परिबानी व्हाट आर द हर्डल्स दे आर फेसिंग सो दैट इज व्हाट इज कॉल्ड गो अलोंग मेथड गेट अलोंग हला आमे जत्ता बेले गोटे गां को जाउचे यू ट्राई टू गेट अलोंग विथ so that you will get a very rich data आमे जाई कि जन घरे सर्वे करिया पे आसीचु कहि कि पचार देले it becomes a very formal way of asking them research participant को to support to richest data आनिया पे हमको कोन करिया पे पड़िबो you have to be a part of them but maintain your distance and don't develop any value it should be value neutral but you have to get along with them to get the proper information तमे जदि जाई गोटे घरे पचारिबो तम घरे डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस हुए कि तमे समान को नाही हुए नाही किंतु जते बेले तांको संगरे रहि कि देखिबो you will find there are many ways in which domestic violence actually takes place तमे जदि गोटे यूनिवर्सिटी स्टूडेंट को पचारिबो आर यू डिसैटिस्फाइड विथ योर यूनिवर्सिटी से सब बेले कहबे ना केबे डिसैटिस्फाइड नै बट stay get along with them for 5-6 days तंग संगे रहि कि तंग संगे कैंटीन बसो तंग संगे पोस्ट ऑफिस बसो तंग संगे तमे हॉस्टल ले गप करो ताले you will be knowing that how they what are their reactions said fine go along get along एबे गोटे very new टूल हेछि जोटा कि वर्ल्ड बैंक जते इंटरनेशनल डेवलपमेंट एजेंसीज कोचंती टू मेक यूज ऑफ तापरे ट्रांजैक्ट वाकेला आमे जते बेले गोटे विलेज को जाउछे आमे जदि जोटे ओलोचे पूरा गां भितरे बुली बुली जिबा लोक माने पछ पछ जानती बहुत कथा कहंती से माने केवल गोटे रिसर्चर को कहंती तांको भितर कथार्ता हैला बेले मध्ये वी गेट टू नो मेनी थिंग्स कारण यू कैन गेट द इंट्रिकेसीज सो डेटा इंट्रिकेसीज हाउ टू डिस्कवर द डेटा इंट्रिकेसीज for which I have mentioned about the go along, get along and the transact what method. आउ एगुड़ा तो गूगल फॉर्म ये एगुड़ा को समस्या में जानी चे आउ जैसे बोले क्वांटिटेटिव डाटा भी ऑब्जर्वेशन थ्रू रे आसपरिबो इंटरवेंशन सिमुलेशन आउ लोकल रिकॉर्ड भी हमें पाई परिबा हमें जैसे बोले गोटे गां रो मोर्टालिटी मॉर्बिडिटी आमे देखिया पे जाउचे केते पिला जन्म हेचंती वर्तमान केते अछन अंगनबाड़ी दीदी रा खाता रो जदि आमे देखिया आमे बहुत जिंस पाइबा सो वी हैव टू रिट्राइव देम फ्रॉम द लोकल रिकॉर्ड्स जनो लोकल रिकॉर्ड रो जहा थिबो आमे प्रकृत डेटाटा देखिबा सही जो रिकॉर्ड अछि केते पिला जन्म हेतले समान कहबे ना एठी जन्म चाइल्ड माने मोर्टालिटी हेनी किंतु जते बेला आमे जिबा घर घर बोली करबा सर्वे तापरे आमे जानि परिबा तेनो लोकल रिकॉर्ड भी के समय अनेक समय भी थाए अनेक समय भी न थाए सो इट इज रिसर्चर्स रिस्पांसिबिलिटी टू कलेक्ट द डेटा रिट्राइव द डेटा फ्रॉम द लोकल records केते टंका असला कोन हला कोड से खर्च हला so that you can know that what are the heads of expenditure made by a panchayat of a village सेमती qualitative data पाइका हमको observation करिया पई पड़िबो this should be a silent observation and you can observation कोन करिबो not only their possessions but their body language their gestures their postures everything you have to take their mood all these things should come into the ambit of your observation to get the data and information tapre case study hochi di prakara one is the for case reporting that is case जोटा को आमे कहूचे केस स्टोरीज कर दोचे खूब अल्प समय रे कलेक्ट कर दोचे गोटे पर्टिकुलर केस को ने किंतु जते बेला हम केस स्टडी करे इट इज अ वेरी इलोंगेटेड way of looking at things. ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ elongated way ରେ ଆମେ ତାର diary, ତା ଘର ଲୋକ, ତା ବିଷୟରେ over the time, over the years ଆମେ କଲେ ଯାଇ ଗୋଟେ case study ରେ successful ହବା. କିନ୍ତୁ ଏଇଠି ମୁଁ ପିଲାମାନେ କହିବି ଯେତେବେଳେ research କରୁଛ, when you are taking a case study method, a very big sample. It is an interpretative paradigm on which we are basing our research. Then our sample size should be very limited because it's a very, very time consuming process. Then in-depth interview kariba, and in in-depth interview, we do not have much what you say structured questions. So in order to get the data very rich and to get the very in-depth data, we need to make the questions very open-ended. The researcher becomes a listener here. So the researcher doesn't have much intervention to do, only to float the idea, then he has to find the responses. Then in-depth interview, our focus group katha kahichi, kemiti ame focus group naba, so that the cross-filtration of data focus group jone gote katha kauthubo, au jon ko na eta no eta. So you have to moderate it and you have to become the facilitator. Sometimes in the focus group, gote asubidha with data collection, there are some dominant voices. You should know how to regulate and how to minimize the voices, and there you have to work as an umpire. It is data collection, it is a very, very important thing. Then we will go to the advantages and disadvantages of primary data. Our primary data, field data interpretation is better. It is a very fresh data and it is evidenced by you and you vouch upon the data. Then secondly, targeted issues are addressed. Role of panchayat, the role of siphoning of money, secondary data. These things can be captured through primary data. Efficient spending for information. So एठी कोन हबो ना खूब अल्प पैसा रे तुमे निजे गुडे information collect करि परिबो. Our data, decency of data is very decent in primary. कारण तुमे निजे collect करछो, निजे जानुछो, and you know what is the real data, and you will get the real data from the primary sources. And it addresses specific researches, many research issues pertaining to a locality or a local community can be addressed through your primary information data collection and greater control. You have a control over the thing, because suppose it is an interventional study. Gote gaare midday meal diya hochi bole ame koche midday meal attendance padhai dochi, gote gaare midday meal diya hochi, dita gaare midday meal, kintu gote gaare tame dekhucho je nai eti turn out honi, then you go to the quality of the midday meal. So you will midday meal to dita diya hochi, kintu quality re be bahut bhalo quality, dita kar same quality achi. Then you go to the quantity re dekho, tapre diversity re dekho. So you will find the real essence through primary data. So all these things are there. Secondary data katha kahuche, secondary data is inexpensive कारण तुमको एते पैसा खर्च करिया पे पड़िबनी कारण एथिरे तमरो फील्ड टूर न थाए तमे बस कि डेस्क रिव्यू रे बहुत गुडे डेटा आनी परिबो and it is easily accessible. Agically internet jugare we are getting data and all the agencies are also trying to upload their data as much as possible, and they are immediately available, and it provides the essential background to clarify, find the research problem and review of literature. In secondary data, secondary data forms a base, but the top up always comes from the primary data. Then this is all about the primary and the secondary data. Then we will come to contiguous and discrete data. Continuous and discrete data समस्त हमें जानी चाहिए. Continuous data होची माने it can take the any value. For example, the height, weight, then your temperature, length, it can change over time. The weight of a baby can change over time. And 2.5 coche, 3.8 inches coche, 37.8 miles cover kala train boli coche. These are all continuous data. Discrete data hochi very much finite, man tar gote fixed number thae. It is easy to visualize. Je manakara gote gaare 30 household hochante below poverty line. This is a discrete data, and it has finite number of data values. Ame manakara koche mane 5 unmarried girls are in the hostel. Then that is again what you say a discrete data. Then we will say about the button data source ko asiba. When we talk about the sources of secondary data, ame samaste researches secondary data पर dependent. Onek samay be ame jetole gote paper lekhu maybe we do not have access, or we cannot access the primary data due to our busy schedule or something for some constant. So we depend on secondary data. So when we depend on secondary data, we take them from the published sources, and there, but the credibility of the data you should look into, because there are, in the age of internet age, we find there are many data available on the internet, but credibility is always challenged. Therefore, what in order to how to establish the credibility, tame dekhibo gote classical author boy thibo kimba publishing company manakara, suppose I am taking from Elsevier, I am taking from Sage, I am taking from Springer. They are all what I say as publishing houses. They have a name and fame, and they have a careful scrutinization of the data. So that data is a more valid data, and time, date, everything you have to see. Gote 50 varsha talara data is an obsolete data for us. So all these things we have to see. And published electronic sources jodi ame dekhiba, date, time, au authenticity upare dekhiba. Kan date, time, manakara ko data ko puruna data ki anithibo ki kar personal gote choto jagara data deithibo, don't take it as the be all and end all for your research. Then credibility of internet data bi gote samare bahut questionable thila, kintu aji au ete questionable nahi, because today almost all the journals and online data, online books are available. Then ame jodi joda open sources ku jaiki anuche, we can get a good a quality of data and a good amount of data also. Some data are free and others you have to pay a price. तमे देखो तो बहुत समय gesture रे तमे चाहिले भी तमे देखियो खाली preview देखिबो, किंतु से डाटा तुमको मिले नहीं, तेणु से डाटा पाइका गोटे समय प्राइस पे करिया पे पड़े. इवन पिला माने मु कहूची आमे बेले बेले इमेजेस गुडा नौचे, केवल स्टॉक रो इमेजेस गुडा कहूची प्राइस फ्री, ताको तुम नहीं परिबो, यूज करि परिबो, किंतु अन्य गुडा का पाई दे आर लाइसेंस. You cannot take those images. जदि नौचो, you take the permission. आउ गोटे कथा कहूची एटी रिसर्चर मान को about data and all that. Models आमे जे बेले बेले मॉडल गुडा कने एकरी मॉडल टेस्टिंग करू. बर्तमान मु सुनी सेली पियरसन जदि 5000 to 10,000 आमे दोचे, they are giving us the license for the models. तेणु पियरसन थ्रू रे आमे जदि कोनोसी मॉडल वेस्टर्न ये रे माने हेइची से मानकर कॉपीराइटर होइची पियरसन टू मध्य आमे मॉडल गुडा को आणुचु. नचे आमे कोन करचु डायरेक्टली से जे मॉडल टा ऑथर इफ ही इज अलाइव किंबा जहा को कॉपीराइट देचंदी तांको लेखुचु दैट वी आर मो मने कर क्लाइमेट चेंज ऊपर गोटे काम करूथिले डिजास्टर ऊपर जो से कि महान इटालियन कर मॉडल टा नेली. महान इटालियन का मॉडल टा तांको यूनिवर्सिटी कॉपीराइट अछि, तेनु तांको लेखिली से माने मते देले यू कैन टेस्ट इट इन योर लोकल स्पेसिफिक मॉडल एंड यू गिव अस द रिजल्ट. तेनु एटा होछि दिस इज द वे we can collect the data, but all data are not free, are not in open access, so you have to pay your price, and you have to also get the permission, copyright permission ja pake thibo tanko to permission te aniba. And then we will go for again the next, we will be telling about published printed sources को गुड़ाक हेई परिबो को source रो आमे नहीं परिबा after selection जेतबेले आमे गोटे topic select कर दोचे books provide insight and on how much work has already been done on the same topic आमे गोटे topic के नहीं जे प्रथमे आमे देखुचे research gap टा what are the gray areas that we have to find out because we have to take up the research on the gray areas. Here data also plays an important role. Bohiro jota anuche information taku ame data boli bhaboni. So that is also a data. Data khali number nuhe. Information is also data that I want to clarify. So when we go for a topic, ame kon korche what are the areas ame dekhuche topic taku finalize karne gote broad thematic ye ame if conceptualize korche for our research. In that case what we are doing, we first of all see what are the books available and we prepare your literature review and from the literature review ame kon koruche and literature review ta bi jo koche from the most authenticated source mu kahibi ko guda ko source amara then say through ame nouche neikri koruche and when we find there are certain areas ame dekhuche a area apare kamo heiche but there are certain areas where no work has been done where I can also venture into. So say jo area ta hoche gray area and that gives me the academic logic for my research. Mu kahi ke research ta koruchi jane mate kaibo ya pare bahut kamo heiche tume kon karibo. So your earnest duty as a researcher is to get the information from the most authenticated sources and to see what are the areas which have been touched upon and what are the areas which are understudied. The understudied areas becomes your research gap. Say research gap ko nekiri ame study kare. And here information becomes a very important data for us for shaping our topic and deciding the academic logic of my topic. Journal periodical kotha koibi kebala bohiru ame nouni. Journals and periodicals play a very crucial role in our research and it is as far as data collection is concerned. Kana bohira bohite bahut chanchalo puruna hai jaye. Journal and research articles, periodicals and bahut gode research article tha. And research articles are very fresh and afresh. They give you the most fresh data. Therefore, a journal periodical opere bahut nirbhar karu. They provide us the updated information which at times books cannot provide. So secondly, journals can give us information on many topics, specific topics, which you are researching rather talking about the general topic. Bohire gote kon hite gote bada thematic area ne kintu बहुत समय जो जर्नल आर्टिकल गुड़ा करे माइक्रो स्टडीज बेस्ड ऑन प्राइमरी डेटा से गुड़ा का बहुत था so that there from we get rich data for our research. So you can prefer books as a basement to prepare the foundation of your research, but you can enrich your research from the data that you get from the recent articles that are published in the journals and the periodicals. And then come to the third category, that is the magazines and the newspapers. And if we look at the magazines and newspapers, they are also very effective, but not very reliable like your articles. Article is communicating author for everything he or she remains accountable. Jo mane bada journal, they also cross check many times the data and they see you have to give a declaration that the data furnished by you in the article are very, very authentic, and therefore they can, if there will be any problem relating to data or the data is challenged, they can also challenge you. So you have to look into that. And there in some cases some information however can be obtained from the magazines and newspapers. For example, जेतबेले COVID चलथिला, कोविड रे इतने मीडिया हाइलाइट हेतला इतने फीचर आर्टिकल बाहर थला जे कोविड रो बहुत कोविड रिलेटेड रिसर्च दे वर डिपेंडेंट ऑन योर मैगजीन्स एंड न्यूज़पेपर्स आउ जदि आमे देखिबा स्टैटिस्टिकल हैंडबुक्स डिस्ट्रिक्ट गैजेटियर्स नेशनल इकोनॉमिक सर्वेज सेंसस हैंडबुक फाइल्स activity report file जो different file भी हमें data retrieve करो with permission and the reports of the reports of many organizations they also give you rich data. So जो internal data collected all this World Bank report, suppose Human Development Report of UNDP, they play a very significant role and but that data is more macro in character. बहुत कम जगह micro data था, their nature of the data is macro. From macro you can take a turn to the micro data from your own study. Our published thesis रो मध्य आमे बहुत गुडे जोड़ा recently published thesis तेथरो मध्य आमे गुडे information पाइथा तापरे आमे जदि ई sources को वर्तमान जीबा कौन printed ई sources आमे पाइबा ई journals वर्तमान आमे देखुचे आमे ProQuest आमे Jester आमे SSRN ये सब गुडा को access करूचे काहे ना latest journals are difficult to retrieve without subscription कारण बहुत जगह subscription दरकार हुए तेणु आम मान को भलिया जो public universities they have and private universities they give us the what you say the access to such journal Google Scholar को हमारा access जदि दे दोचे ProQuest को दोचे we are getting a lot of information माने access to the data to the माने जो ई journal गुड़ा का हमें access करी पारुचे and university जो ई library सब अच्छी Utkal University has a big e library where e resources are there. You can view any journal, print it, and those are not available. You can make an order for them. At least our journal bisare gote idea habo jothu ki ame data pai pariba. So general website jodi dekhiba, general websites do not contain very reliable information. बहुत समय website रे जिए पर से upload कर दिए and many of the information are misleading in character. So therefore you have to quote it. Jodi kichi problem hela, you can also reach the person, you can reach the site and you can lodge a complaint. Our web blogs hochi आजिकली web blogs बहुत common होची प्राय देखिबे western developing countries से जो world organizations माने developing countries ने कि बहुत blog लगचंदे even India रे भी blogging has become very common and these are they contain certain data because these diaries are reliable because they are बड़ा बड़ा लोक मानकर जो blog गुड़ा पे जदि देखिबे मने करो सेथरे आपण देखिबे डायरीज माने फील्ड डायरी ता से माने सेथरे भी दियंती so that you get a lot of information about the field from them. तापरे database, what is a database? मैं data sources कोइले data कोइले types of nature of data कोइले so types of data कोइले sources of data कोइले. Now we will come to database. A database is a collection of information that is organized that can be easily accessed, managed and updated. Database ta kon bonus database hochi gote jagare data thae. It is a repository we can say where data is well managed. It is updated from time to time. Gote data obsolete hi rahe nahi, data sabu bale change hota hai. And the second is I will be telling indexing database. Indexing database is a way to optimize the performance of data. Index etle ami jaha khojiba very quickly if we used to the indexing pattern we can quickly collect the data from the index database. Bartaman mu jaunchi kahiba pai apun manku je what are the sources data sub tools or data platform upare mu tike kahibi je Bartaman web scale discovery search single window search AML upare kahibi je need to know which resources are indexed in EDS which are not. EBSCO जो अच्छी ETS गोटे होची is a Google like search engine for Spiva library. It searches the library catalog and many other databases simultaneously. से इतने quickly data दिए जे आपण तार relevance तार credibility भी very high. आउ एटा को हमें कौन पाए जो बही article एगुड़ा को पाए का हमें ए database टा को access करी परिवा जदि कहार थिबो you can also access this database. And तापर होची Google Scholar हमें समस्त प्राय यूज करछे लाइब्रेरी लिंक्स आर्टिकल लेवल लिंक्स एटा से कोन करे Google Scholar विभिन्न पब्लिशिंग हाउस रो विभिन्न लाइब्रेरी रो आनी कि इट्स अ वेरी बिग repository. Our patrons affiliated by it with a library. This program works best for electronic resources or conference article. Even conference proceeding गुड़ा कभी Google Scholar रे मिली जाउची तेनु सेटा भी अपन माने देखिबे. तापरे full text database like Science Direct, full Springer और Willy. किंतु बहुत समय रे Springer, Willy और ये Science Direct full article हमको मिले नहीं. जदि यूनिवर्सिटी रो सब्सक्रिप्शन थिबो ताहले हमको मिलिबाटा सहज होबे. So if you can get a pathway through your university, you can get a very good access to that database. तापर आसिला हमरो ए जो इंडिया स्टार्ट आउ prowess of PQDT या प्रटिका कहिबी. India Start hella is the most comprehensive e-resource socio-economic statistical information man of India jete statistical information खोजिबे many of the vital statistics कथा मु कहूची एथरे India Start ये रे मिलिबो. आउ जो prowess होची proposal writing for success. हमें जो माने thesis लेखुचे report लेखुचे proposal लेखुचे से माने एटा को access करंतु. You will get a very good idea how to write a very good proposal, how to write apply for a project, how to write a project report. इसरे बहुत सुंदर अपन को guidelines मिली पारिबो. और जो ProQuest रो thesis dissertation हमें बहुत लंबा समय रे ProQuest यूनिवर्सिटी माने दउचंती. You can access जो पिला माने मोर रिसर्च करचंती ए प्लेटफॉर्म रे अचंती. I will request everyone ProQuest रो जदि आपण पाउचंती thesis dissertation को access करंतु so that you will know the style of writing, how the in present international community, what type of thesis writings, what is the style, what is the referencing style that is accepted. Our committee writing how the thesis is built up. Tapre general abstract our index database upare puni कहबी जो Scopus, Web of Science, Science Direct रे हमें Scopus बहुत समय Scopus journal टे खोजुचे. Scopus journal गुड़ा का index journal गुड़ा का हमें Scopus index journal गुड़ा कर इतने सबू हमें पाइजिबा विभिन्न information. तापरे होची subject index में जो Sky Finder Scholar is the online equivalent for chemical रे basis science पिलांगा पाइंका. आउ गोटे होची psych जो psych infoटा सेटा होची हमारो social science रे बहुत दरकार वे behavioral humanities social science. It is a database of abstracts of literature in the field of psychology. American Psychological Association सेमाने कौन करंदी ए जो psych net रे कौन आउ psych info रे सेमाने कौन करंदी सेमाने होचंदी यार third party vendor सेमान का पाखरे रहिची. They manage this particular database. तापरे where we can find the specific type of data. जदि हमें article टे खोजुचे हमें को database रो पाई परिबा. Article खोजिया पे single window search, Google Scholar, publisher platform, our subject indexes, our social science research network SSRN. एथिरे गले हमें social science रो बहुत गुडे article पाइबा. बही जदि हमें खोजिया पे पाइबा हमें single window search तापर Google Scholar, publishers platform, subject index करिकरी हमें बही जोड़ा को openly available books ताकु मध्य हमें पाई परिबा. तापर conference proceedings जदि हमें देखिया पे चाहूचे कारण मन एक thematic नहीं कि बहुत conferences होची जोते कि बहुत गुडे discussion में proceedings at least की आउटकम गुडा कथा है तेन ताकु कले हमें कोन करिबा ना सिंगल विंडो सर्च आउ गूगल स्कॉलर आउ आमे सेतरे पब्लिशर प्लेटफॉर्म सब्जेक्ट इंडेक्सेस रु मध्य पाई परिबा रिसर्च डाटा पाया पहले गूगल डाटा आउ आमे हार्वर्ड डाटा वर्स आउ गोटे अछि मांडले डाटा एई जो सोर्स गुडा करू आमे एई डाटा गुडा को पाई परिबा डिसर्टेशन आउ थेसिस पाइका आमे समस्त जानचे शोधगंगा इनफ्लिनेट जो PQDT आउ NDLTD ग्लोबल सोसाइटी NDLTD हला नेटवर्क डिजिटल लाइब्रेरी ऑफ थेसिस एंड डिसर्टेशन इवन american.edu एथुरु आमे बहुत गुडे डिसर्टेशन थेसिस भी बड़े बड़े पाउ कारण विभिन्न बढ़िया बढ़िया यूनिवर्सिटी रो मिले आपण माने एक्सेस करंतु गोटे मेंबरशिप नै करी देखिबे बहुत गुडे पाइबे आ पैटर्न जो माने साइंस बिलांक पई पर्टिकुलरली मु कहिबी जो जेएस पैटर्न टेक्स्ट फुल टेक्स्ट डेटाबेस अछि गूगल पैटर्न अछि कैनेडियन पैटर्न डेटाबेस अछि इन अदर इंटरनेशनल पैटर्न ऑफिस विपो जोटा अछि विपोटा होछि वर्ल्ड इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन अछि ए जो डेटाबेस रे मिलि जिवो कोन कोन पैटेंटिंग हेछि पैटेंट जेते बळे रजिस्टर करा जाय सब आ पैटेंट हे गला परे माने अवार्ड हला परे मध्ये तार मिलिबो इंफॉर्मेशन आ तेनु सब पांगा ए जो डेटाबेस आ ये करिबा तापरे आमे ओपन एक्सेस सोर्सेस पर बही केमति करिबा ना डायरेक्टरी ऑफ ओपन एक्सेस बुक ता कोंती DOAB ओपन एक्सेस पब्लिशिंग इन यूरोपियन नेटवर्क जो माने यूरोप रे किछि थिबो एक्सेस याकु कोंते ओपन होछि एथिरे मध्ये आमे बहुत गुडे बहिर सोर्स पाई जाऊ ओपन बुक पब्लिशर्स रु पाइबा स्प्रिंजर ओपन बुक्स रु पाइबा जोडा खाली ओपन जोडा को पेड बही गुडा करे मु कहि लेखिनी कन पिला माने ओपन बुक एक्सेस रु एथुरा नै परिबे टाइलर फ्रांसिस बुक्स रो ओपन एक्सेस तर नै परिबा ओपन ह्यूमैनिटीज प्रेस रु नै परिबा डिजिटल पब्लिक लाइब्रेरी ऑफ अमेरिका जोटा को DPLA कहते वेरी पॉपुलर इन यूएस ताको नै परिबा गैलिका रु नै परिबा फ्रेंच नेशनल लाइब्रेरी ऑनलाइन जोटा सेथु नै परिबा हाइथी ट्रस्ट रु नै परिबा इंटरनेट आर्काइव्स कोटे अछि सेथुरु मध्ये आमे बहुत गुडे बही पाई परिबा तापर लिब्रिवॉक्स रु आमे मध्ये पाई परिबा ओपन कल्चर ई बुक्स पाई परिबा प्रोजेक्ट गुटेनबर्ग जर्मनी रो सेथुरु मध्ये बहुत गुडे भलो बही पिला माने मिली परिबो तेनु तुमे ए बही जदी किछि भलो बही तुमे किनिया पई चाहनो ओपन एक्सेस करे एगुडा कहउछि ओपन सोर्सेस फॉर बुक्स रिसर्च जो माने करछ तापरे रिपोजिटरी जदी आमे खोजिया पई चाहिबा रिपोजिटरी पाइका प्रथमे आमे कोर गोटे अछि इट्स अ बिग रिपोजिटरी डायरेक्टरी ऑफ ओपन एक्सेस रिपोजिटरी अछि एब्सको ओपन डिसर्टेशन सब डिसर्टेशन गुडा MPhil MA PhD सब एथरे मिले ई थेसिस ऑनलाइन सर्विस जो एथोस एथरे प्राय गुडे थेसिस भलो भलो थेसिस जोडा अपलोडेड हेते सब मिले नेटवर्क डिजिटल लाइब्रेरी ऑफ थेसिस अछि सेथुर पाई परिबा तापरे आमे पाइबा डिसर्टेशन जोटा सेटा केवल डिसर्टेशन पे NDLTD होची तार गोटे सोर्स जो थ्रू के आमे डिसर्टेशन पाइबा ओपन एक्सेस थेसिस डिसर्टेशन भी पाई परिबा वाटर जो OATD सेटारु थेसिस कनाडा थेसिस कॉमन इंडिया रे बेसी आमे करते इनफ्लिनेट आउ शोधगंगा जो आमे सेइथरे ये करके थेसिस पाउचे आउ तापर जदी आमे वर्तमान जर्नल गोडा को जिबा जर्नल रा कोठो आमे एक्सेस पाइबा जदी बायोमेड सेंट्रल मु लिखिछि एथरे बेसिकली जदियो बायोमेडिकल एथरे बहुत गुडे ए जो कम्युनिटी हेल्थ जोथरे के सोशल साइंस इन्वॉल्व आमे सेथरे गुडे जर्नल पाउचे आ यार मेथोडोलॉजी गुडा को बहुत समय आमे यूज करू बोली एटा गोटे सोर्स जोटा को आमे यूज करि परिबा डायरेक्टरी ऑफ ओपन एक्सेस जर्नल डोज जोटा सेक्टर पाई परिबा एल्सेवियर ओपन एक्सेस जर्नल पाई परिबा हिंदुआई पब्लिशिंग ओपन हाउस रिसर्च प्रोसेस एंड जर्नल से पाइबा ओपन बायोलॉजी रे बायोलॉजी जो मानकर ओपन ह्यूमैनिटीज प्रेस जर्नल रे ह्यूमैनिटीज रो सब जर्नल बहुत गुडे भलो भलो जर्नल में पाउ हमें जे तापर स्प्रिंजर PubMed ରୁ ଆମେ ଗୁଡେ social science ବି ପାଉଛେ PubMed ସିନା ଆମେ medical nursing ଅଛି କିନ୍ତୁ ସେଥିରେ ବହୁତ social science psychology particularly sociology psychology ର ଆମେ ପାଉ Tyler Francis online open journal ଆଉ Wiley open access journal ରୁ ଆମେ ପାଇପାରିବା ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ହଉଛି popular data banks for social research data ମାନେ ଯୋଉଟା numerical data ଆମେ କୋଉଠୁ ପାଇବା ମୁଁ ଏପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ କହୁଥିଲି ବହି ଜର୍ନାଲ thesis ତାପରେ କହିଲି ସେଥିରୁ ଯାହା ଡାଟା ପାଇବା ଡାଇରେକ୍ଟ ଡାଟା କୋଉଠୁ ପାଇବା ଡାଟା ବ୍ୟାଙ୍କସ୍ ରୁ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଇଣ୍ଟର ୟୁନିଭର୍ସିଟି କନସୋର୍ଟିୟମ ଫର ପଲିଟିକାଲ ଆଣ୍ଡ ସୋସିଆଲ ରିସର୍ଚ୍ଚ ଏଟା ହଉଛି ୟୁନାଇଟେଡ ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ସ ର ସେଥିରୁ ଗୁଡେ ଡାଟା ପାଏ କାରଣ ସେମାନେ କଣ୍ଟ୍ରି ୱାଇଜ ବହୁତ ଡାଟା ଆଣିଥାନ୍ତି ବହୁତ ମାଇକ୍ରୋ ଷ୍ଟଡି ବି ଆଣିକି ଡାଟା ରଖିଥାନ୍ତି ଦ ୟୁକେ ଡାଟା ସର୍ଭିସ ଏଥିରେ ବେଶୀ ମିଳେନି ମୁଁ ନିଜେ ଦେଖିନି କେବେ Council of European Science, Social Science data, এইটারে বহুত গুড়ে ডেটা থাকে আর্কাইভস থাকে অস্ট্রেলিয়ান সোশ্যাল সায়েন্স ডাটা আর্কাইভস রে भी আমি ন্यूमेरिकल ডেটা जो माने पाइबा माने इंडेक्स डाटाटा तापरे आमे केमिति गोटे डाटाबेस को सक्सेसफुली यूज करि परिबा कारण फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल आमे निजर रिसर्च टॉपिक और रिसर्च क्वेश्चन थरो होबा आमे जदि सेही थरो होबा आमे जानिबा आमे कहा ऊपर डेटाटा आणुचे तापरे आमे डेटाबेस आमे केते गुडे डेटाबेस जानले ताको आमे सिलेक्ट करा को थिरे हमर डेटा गुडा को भलो मिलिबो एंड देन the third thing is structure your analysis and presentation finding in a way that is mean आमे लिखी बारे जो जेतबेला आमे गूगल ले सर्च करे लिखी बारे communication also plays a very significant आमे जदि एपट सेपट लिखुचे आमे डेटा पाइबानी आमे कोन लिखले डेटा पाइबा that is very very important for example मु कोन करछि वाटर पाइका मु ग्राउंड वाटर रिसोर्स असेसमेंट फॉर द कंट्री जो जल शक्ति मिशन तापर मु निजे जानिया कथा कोट कोठिछि एनविस जो सेंटर फॉर ओडिशास एनवायरनमेंट hosted by forest and environment department directorate of groundwater survey and investigation department of water resources government of odisha मु जदि सेति की जाउछि मु पाउछि डेटा तेन मु एई डेटाबेस गुडा को वर्तमान खोजिबी दिए तेन मु जानिवा कथा मु कोन ऊपर खोजुछि मु ठीक रे लिखिबी को सोर्स मिलिबो मोर जानिबा दरकार तापर जाय कि खोजिले मु पाइबी कारण नहले अदरवाइज वी विल बी बीटिंग माने जस्ट माने बीटिंग अराउंड द बुश तापर होछि हाउ टू मेक द डाटा सर्च प्रथमे डाटा सर्च पाए बेसिक और एडवांस आगे हम बेसिक डाटा समस्त होबा एंटर सर्च टर्म को आगे एंटर करि परिबा तापर ब्राउज बाय टॉपिक गुडा के दे के हमें भी खोजिले पाखा पाखी टॉपिक सब मिलिबो तापर सीरीज मन कर टाइम सीरीज से कि गोटे डाटा सीरीज देखिया पाइका भी हमें खोजी परिबो अमुक डाटा एतिक टाइम कोटू एतिक टाइम तापरे ज्योग्राफी गोटे एरिया लोकल को नेकरी रीजनल को नेकी नेशनल को नेकी इंटरनेशनल को नेकी ब्राउज बाय डाटा इन्वेस्टिगेटर अपन जदि आइडिया थिबो ए लोक काम करछि दीज आर द अथॉरिटीज हु हैव डन सम वर्क ऑन इट हमें तांको ना देकरी मध्य हमें खोजी परिबा आउ तापरे होछि डाटा फॉर्मेट जदि हमें गोटे फॉर्मेटिंग करछे सेही फॉर्मेट रे जदि के करछबो कि कहार फॉर्मेट आनछे सेमती फॉर्मेट पकेले भी पाखा पाखी डाटा मिलि जिवो आउ इंटरनेशनल डाटा आउ सबु स्टडी के देखले किछि ना किछि किंतु सबु स्टडी के देखिया पय हमरो धैर्य न थाए के समय न थाए so with this we will wind up our presentation if any questions or comment Sir, is there any question?
Yes, madam. In fact, we had some technical glitch, but then we kept on addressing. So the second part of your presentation was quite clear and legible through the LCD panel. And the first part of your presentation, the scholars have access through their respective cell phone. But I'm sure many of them have clarifications to make. Dear scholars, as you could see from the presentation, in fact, this presentation was scheduled by keeping in a view that those who are in have just joined for coursework, PhD coursework, within the next 5 to 6 months, without going to the field, whatever background work, desk work you can do from your computer. That is what precisely Madam has described. So I hope and I expect that there would be a couple of questions for interactions. So whoever has something to clarify, you can come here and do that. You have to bear with the limitation we have technologically, right? Come, come. Yes, ma'am. Some of the participants are coming.
Yes, yes, yes.
One question. How to write proper abstract?
No, yes.
How to write proper abstract?
How to write proper abstract?
Abstract. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So when you are writing is it an abstract or what you are telling me? Abstract means there are two things. Before you make abstract means for a paper you write an abstract, that is in very capsule form you write. And now in the PhD, after you submit your PhD, the synopsis you are giving, and you are again giving an abstract. That is a very miniature form of your synopsis, which is a longer one. So what do you mean by abstract means for the, you are writing the synopsis or abstract? What you are telling exactly?
So exactly, ma'am. I telling abstract.
Abstract means suppose you are giving a submitting an article, you have to write an abstract within 250 words. Is it, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So if you are writing a paper and you are going to write an abstract, you immediately, and it should be within 250 to 300 words, and you have to find out the keywords again. First of all, you decide what is the topic all about, what research questions your paper is dealing with. Number two, what is the methodology in one line, not more than that, and what is the sample size. Then the next one is what is the finding of your study, and sorry, and the location. Location is very important in the abstract because someone will be attracted. Suppose your paper is somewhere in Western Odisha and I am doing a work, I will be attracted. So the location, then the what you do, that what are the major findings, and the how the paper has addressed to the research question you have. And after that, you write the key words that you have used all throughout the paper, 4 to 5 keywords. So that is how you will write the abstract.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next. Yeah, please, sir. You don't need to kneel down, but you can use a chair. Okay?
Good afternoon, madam.
Yes, good afternoon.
I am from political science background.
Yes.
I have a question. Can we conduct research on the mythological stories like Ramayana and Mahabharata? And if we can, what would be the sources of data and whether those data can be relied?
Yes. Sir, reliability is a different question that we will be coming after that. First of all, from the mythological stories, suppose you are taking a political issue, the political competition or the rivalry or whatever it is you are taking. So when you can do a research on that. There is absolute, because and it will be coming in the interpretativist paradigm, because here you are not going to see, because Ramayana and Mahabharata cannot be replicated. So what you will be doing, what are the literature, from the literature you are again going for interpreting, and the interpretation will be made through the discourse and the construction analysis. So you can take up the data and the reliability when you are telling, sir, it can be done. Mahabharata and Ramayana, you can do it from the mythology because they are Indian mythology very much accepted, and you can do the research. And the tool will be deconstruction and discourse analysis. The design will be, the paradigm will be interpretativist analysis, and the research design here will be exploratory analysis, you can say. But about the reliability, again, as there is no primary data, it will be totally based on secondary data and your interpretation of it. So reliability and validity for India, I don't know, it will be accepted to some extent, but for the Western world, it will be a myth again.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Next. No one has anything to get clarified over. ପଚାରିବା ଦରକାର ନାହିଁ, ନାଇଁ ଲାଗିଯିବା କ୍ୱେଶ୍ଚିନ୍ ପଚାରିବା। Ma'am, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Actually, I am from a biotechnology student and working on a plant. I want to search some literatures from old Unani or like Ayurvedic literatures on that plant. Where can I find those data or books?
Sir, actually, one of my scholar was also doing on some Ayush studies, but his was on the patient. So we went to the Ayush hospitals. So in Bhubaneswar, there is a central government hospital, a big Ayurvedic hospital near the SOMS, and the other part is that the government doctors, you can ask them because they will be giving you the right kind of information, because they must be having the books and all that. But now a lot of work is going on ethnomedicines. So the pharmacy people are the right kind of people, and your own department, they can give you the data, because this data I do not know whether they are available in the with the DBT, if some data will be there, and in the research institutes particularly, you can also look into, because IMMT is doing some work, his name is, I'm forgetting, Dr. Dhar, he's doing some work on these ethno things. So you can get the information from them. He is a man from Bhatni, and he is doing the work, I know, because the pharmacy department of my university, they are collaborating with them. And another is recently, sir, I heard in Lucknow, some CSIR lab is there. Some Dr. Gautam Panda, he is doing a lot of work on this.
Thank you. Anyone else? This is an opportunity. The second chapter of your thesis would be ready if you are clear with the concept. That is review of literature. Then third and fourth chapter, technical chapters, if you are working on secondary data. Capitalize the opportunity. Of course, you will share the email ID of all the resource persons. All are accessible and they would be happy to help you. But still, yeah, come.
Ma'am, good evening, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good
Ma'am,
afternoon.
actually, I am doing, research on secondary data. Actually, more data hoji ma'am CPI upare karuchi. Actually, ma'am, base is different CPI data ko use karuchi. Consumer price index.
Consumer price index, huh?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, ma'am, सेठी कौन होती ना different base year रोजी. Actually, से data को केमती नहीं मैं workout करी परिवे.
Exactly.
ସେଠି ମୁଁ problem face
ଆପଣଙ୍କୁ କହୁଥିଲି ଯୋଉ ଡେଟା ଓଭରଲାପିଂ ଉପରେ ମଝିରେ ମୁଁ କହୁଥିଲି, ଆପଣ ଗୋଟେ କୋହର୍ଟ ଡିସାଇଡ୍ କରନ୍ତୁ, ମାନେ କୋଉ ଟାଇମ୍ କୋହର୍ଟର ନଉଛନ୍ତି କନଜ୍ୟୁମର ପ୍ରାଇସ୍, ହ୍ୱାଟ ଇଜ ଦ ଟାଇମ୍ କୋହର୍ଟ ୟୁ ଆର୍ ଡିଲିଂ ୱିଥ୍। ତାପରେ ତାକୁ ନେଇକି ଆପଣ ଇକୋନୋମିକ ସର୍ଭେଟାକୁ ଯଦି ଆପଣ ବେସ୍ କରିବେ, ଅନ୍ୟ ଡେଟା ଗୁଡାକ ନା ଆପଣ ନ୍ୟାସନାଲ ଲେଭେଲରେ କରୁଛନ୍ତି? ନା
Yes, ma'am.
state level? ଆଜ୍ଞା,
Ma'am, national level.
national level.
Ma'am, national level.
ଆପଣଙ୍କ ବେସ୍ ଡାଟା ଆପଣ କୋଉଟାକୁ ନଉଛନ୍ତି କରିଛନ୍ତି? ଗୋଟେ
Different, ma'am, actually ତାର different base year ଆସିଛି. Actually ma'am ମୁଁ ଚାହୁଁଛି time series analysis କରିବା ପାଇଁ।
ହଁ
ମ୍ୟାମ୍ ସେଠି 2012 ମତେ ବେସ୍ ଇୟର ମିଳୁଛି, ତା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ବେସ୍ ଇୟର ମିଳୁଛି। ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି ମ୍ୟାମ୍ କିଛି ଗୋଟେ ମେଥଡ ମତେ ମିଳିପାରିବ କି ଯେମିତି ସବୁଗୁଡାକୁ ମୁଁ ଗୋଟେ ବେସ୍ ଇୟର କନଭର୍ଟ କରିକି ଦେନ୍ ମୁଁ ଆନାଲିସିସ୍ କରିବି।
ଏକ୍ସାକ୍ଟଲି ସାର୍, ଆମେ ବି ମୁଁ ସେଇ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଗୋଟେ କାମ କରୁଥିଲି ମୁଁ ବି ସେୟା, ମତେ ଅସୁବିଧା ହେଲା। କାହାର 2010 ର ଡାଟା ମିଳୁଛି, କୋଉଠି 2008 ର ମିଳୁଛି, କିନ୍ତୁ ତାର ନେକ୍ସଟ ଡାଟାଟା ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ ଥ୍ରେଶୋଲ୍ଡ ଡାଟା ନଉଛୁ, ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ
Yes,
ବେସ୍
ma'am.
ଡାଟା ଗୋଟେ ଥ୍ରେଶୋଲ୍ଡ ଇୟର ନଉଛୁ। ଯେତେବେଳେ ବେସ୍ ଡାଟାଟା ମୁଁ ଦେଖିଲି ସବୁ ପାରାମିଟର ମୋର, ମାନେ କୌଣସି
Yes,
ଗୋଟେ
ma'am.
ଡେଟାବେସରେ ସବୁ ପାରାମିଟର ରହୁନି। ତେଣୁ ଆମେ ଦେଖିଲୁ ଯୋଉ ଇୟରରେ ସବୁ ପାରାମିଟର ଗୁଡାକ ଆଭେଲେବୁଲ ହଉଛି ସେଇଟାକୁ ବେସ୍ ଡାଟା ଧରିଲୁ। ମନେକର ମୋର 4ଟା ଇଣ୍ଡେକ୍ସ ମାନେ ପାରାମିଟର ଅଛି, ଯୋଉଟା ଇଣ୍ଡେକ୍ସ ଆପଣ କହୁଛନ୍ତି। ଯଦି ଗୋଟେ ଡେଟାବେସରେ ମତେ 4ଟା ଯାକ ମିଳୁଛି, ସେଇଟାକୁ ମୁଁ ବେସ୍ ଇୟର କଲି। ତାପରେ ଥ୍ରେଶୋଲ୍ଡ ଇୟରରେ ବି ବହୁତ ସମୟ ଡେଟା ମିଳୁନି, ନ୍ୟୁଜ ପେପରରେ ଗୁଡେ ବାହାରୁଛି। ସେ ନ୍ୟୁଜ ପେପର
Yes,
କଣ୍ଟେଣ୍ଟ ଆନାଲିସିସ ରୁ ଆମେ ଆଣିଲୁ। ଆପଣ ଯଦି ସେୟା କରିପାରିବେ ତାହେଲେ ଯାଇକି ଆପଣଙ୍କୁ ନିଜକୁ ୱାର୍କଆଉଟ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ପଡିବ। ଆଉ କିନ୍ତୁ ଆପଣ ଯୋଉ ୱାର୍କଆଉଟ ଟା କରିବେ, ୟୁ ହାଭ୍ ଟୁ ଗିଭ୍ ଅ ନୋଟ୍ ଆଣ୍ଡ ୟୁ ହାଭ୍ ଟୁ ଜଷ୍ଟିଫାଇ ଇଟ୍।
yes ma'am. Thank you ma'am. Thank you ma'am.
Next. Anyone else? We look forward to have gender parity, even in the workshop. Why women researchers are not interacting? None. Shall we wind up? You should capitalize the opportunity. Madam has been not only a seasoned researcher and senior academician, but she has been one of the proactive members of Odisha Backward Commission, which deals with, tons and loads of data sets. That's how they frame policy documents for the government. I mean, you still have the opportunity, if you wish, you can interact with her, get some clarification. So we'll wind up. Yeah, ma'am. So we'll wind up the session now.
Yes, sir.
And I request you to share the copy of the presentation which we will share with the participants as part of the study material.
Yes, sir. I will send it in your email so that you can share
Yes,
it among the participants.
madam.
I will.
The next speaker has joined, Professor Dukhabandhu Sahu from IIT Bhubaneswar. You
Okay,
can
sir.
see.
Okay. No. Yes. Namaskar. So I am leaving, sir. I am leaving the platform. I will send it. Okay, sir. No.
Yes. Yeah. Namaskar, madam.
Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I audible? Sir, you have to unmute. हेलो ଆପଣ ନା ଆପଣଙ୍କ ଆୱାଜ ଆସୁନି ବିଲକୁଲ। ଆପଣଙ୍କ ମାଇକ୍ରୋଫୋନରେ କିଛି ଇସ୍ୟୁ ଅଛି ସେଠି। କଣ ସେ କଲେ ହବ ଟିକେ ସଜେଷ୍ଟ ପ୍ରଥମ विदाउट हेडफोन ट्राई करନ୍ତୁ।
सर विदाउट हेडफोन भी ट्राई करନ୍ତୁ कोन आउट देखନ୍ତୁ। हेलो
Without headphone ରେ କଣ ଆୱାଜ ଟା clear
हाँ सर ଏବେ ବଢି ବୋଲୁଛି ତାହେଲେ ମୋ ଏପଟେ ସ୍ପିକର ରେ ଶୁଭୁନି ଆଉ ସେପଟୁ ଶୁଭୁନି ଏନିୱେ ଓକେ
ସାର୍ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଶୁଭୁଛି
ଆଚ୍ଛା ମୁଁ ଶୁଭିବା ଦରକାର ଠିକ ଅଛି ଆଉ ସେପଟୁ ନ ଶୁଭିଲେ ଚଳିବ ଓକେ ଓକେ ଫାଇନ୍ we can carry on okay so
so we'll start the session.
yes sir.
Yeah, so I must confess at starting of the session that we are not as technically as robust like IIT Bhubaneswar.
See, actually,
So
probably the glitch is from my side. It's not I had Bhubaneswar. I'm at my place, so I'm sorry actually for putting you in trouble.
no,
Uh, in fact, my speaker,
actually,
I'm not finding the speaker. Probably my son has kept it somewhere. Thing, so you know. Okay, okay.
so perhaps your son doesn't want you to talk about time series analysis.
Time series actually it's on regressor, no?
Yeah, that's what he doesn't want you to talk on time series, so you can go ahead with regression analysis.
I could have actually. I did not find. I saw about econometrics and regression actually.
Sure. So we will start the session. So dear
Yes.
participants, in fact, as I had briefed you earlier, we had two parallel blocks of scholars. One block from science and the other block from social science, humanities and management. Now, since it is online session, they are all seated in a common hall. And so accordingly, you can go ahead with your presentation. Dear participants, we have, as in the program schedule, you can find out, we have Professor Dukhabandhu Sahu from IIT Bhubaneswar. He is professor and head of School of Social Science, Humanities and Management at IIT Bhubaneswar. And he will take you through certain applications of regression analysis. Now, I'm convinced that you had some challenges yesterday doing the regression analysis, although you do not express, but I have realized that. So you have another session now to overcome those challenges, and especially who had actually had hands-on on regression, maybe you can clarify all your doubts after his deliberation. So, sir, the virtual floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Okay, actually, just a minute. I got my speakers now, actually, somewhere over there. So if I can fix the
Yes.
speaker, that will be better. I can know. Okay, sir, can you speak from your side?
Yes. Yeah. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear, but actually, I want to be active. It's just,
It's
okay.
audible. It's quite audible.
I test speaker. I don't know. There's some problem actually with me. Actually, the problem is from select speaker. Okay, can you speak some words from your side, sir, so that let me see with Anand,
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
yes. So thank you.
I
So
spoke only one word. That is yes.
thank you, sir. Hello.
Yeah. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, so first, actually, let me be honest to myself and let me beg apology for being late. Of course, some understanding or misunderstanding or something. So, though it's nice of Dr. Anjan, no, to invite me. Actually, I had initial plan of going physically there, but because of some compelling reasons, I couldn't go. So it's basically, of course, I do not know the composition of the class. So it'll be largely, I'll be talking on econometrics, simple and multiple regression. So I think I am audible. Anjan sir, am I audible? Somebody need
Yes,
to
yes.
yes. Somebody need to
Yes.
respond to me so that okay. So I will start with what is. Hmm? So I'm sharing my this thing. Is my screen visible, sir? Some.
Yes, sir, it is visual.
Yes.
So see, I'm given the task of giving a talk on uh, basic econometrics, particularly the no, two variable regression and multiple regression, simple and multiple regression. It's basically the concepts from econometrics, and let's understand what econometrics is. It's the application of mathematical statistics to economic data. Of course, since me being a student of economics, so given written this thing, it's the application of mathematical statistics to economic data to lend empirical support to the econometric model or mathematical models and obtain some numerical results. So what does it mean? That you must have some econometric or mathematical model which should have some theoretical background, and you need to justify and test this mathematical model with your empirical data. That's what actually the idea of an econometrics. Others actually saying that it's a quantitative analysis of actual economic phenomenon based on concurrent and development of theory and observations related to appropriate methods of inference. But then it's not necessarily or exclusively should be economic theory. You can have other theoretical justifications. Those theoretical justification needs to be supported empirically for empirical analysis or empirical validation of the theory or the law or the hypothesis. You should have some mathematical formula. Let's say X depends on Y. Or please pardon me, I'm me being a student of economics. I'll have this example of economics largely. So if you have economic laws which can be quantified, then those economic laws needs to be tested under or in empirical field. So that requires the expression of your economic laws in mathematical form, then estimation of it. But it's not necessarily that you should have economic laws only. You can have any kind of law, and to support, to lend empirical support to this law, if you use statistical tools or use mathematical statistics to justify those economic laws, then that is actually econometrics. So I'll give. That means your econometrics should have economic theory, not necessarily economic theory, but it should have some theory, and that theory should be expressible in mathematical form, and you use economic statistics and mathematical statistics to justify this economic theory. Of course, me being a student of economics, actually, I'm repeatedly saying economic theories. You need not have economic theory. You can have alternative theories. Those theories should be expressible in mathematical form, and that mathematical form should be estimated. So, just a minute. So, am I audible or still now understood, or I'll just summarize whatever I say? That you have theories. For me, as a student of economics, I say economic theories. That economic theories, or for you, it could be some other theories, should be expressible in functional form. That functional form need to be estimated with empirical data, for which you ought to have the empirical data. With those empirical data, you can test it, you can test those theories. That's what actually econometrics is. You can have two variable, you can have multiple variable. I'm giving you here an example of the psychological law of consumption. Says the consumption function says that as income increases, consumption increases. This is what actually one of the theories. I do not know the it's been really great to have physically present there, but unfortunately because of some other reasons I could not. The consumption theory says, I assume there are some economic student here. Consumption theory says as income changes, consumption changes, or as income increases, consumption increases. This is actually consumption theory. But the increase in consumption due to increase in income is not proportional. That means if your income increases by 100%, that doesn't necessarily mean your consumption will also increase by 100%. It will increase, but less than 100%. The increase in consumption due to increase in income, actually in economic laws, is called the marginal propensity to consume. According to this hypothesis given by Keynes, or this theory given by Keynes, this marginal propensity to consume is less than 1, meaning thereby that if 1 rupee increases in income, that doesn't increase the consumption by 1 unit. That is what actually the theory is, economic theory. So we need to put it in mathematical form, specify it in mathematical form, that your consumption expenditure or consumption, here in my symbol I have given y as the consumption and x as the income. That y depends on x, which is your income. We need to express that statement. We need to express that economic law into mathematical function. So the statement we understood like that, like this, is that as income increases, consumption will increase, meaning thereby consumption will be a function of the income. So I specify it in mathematical form, mathematical mode, and I wrote that income, sorry, your consumption y in my example is a function of consumption x. And actually, so of course, you can estimate the relationship, non-linear relationship or different other kind of relationship. But we have expressed it in a linear relationship. That why your consumption is a function of income, which is x. It can be actually expressed in linear form like this: y is equal to beta 1 plus beta 2 x, means where beta 2 will measure a change in y due to change in x, or change in consumption due to change in income, which is your MPC. That's beta 2 is MPC, and beta 1 is autonomous consumption. It's if your income is 0, that means your x is 0, then what is the level of consumption? So x, beta 1 and beta 2 are called the parameters and needs to be estimated from empirical data. So this is what actually the expression or symbolical expression of a law. The law is that income affects consumption, or consumption is being determined by income. That's the law. I expressed it in mathematical form. So the previous one is a mathematical form in linear form. Of course, that it can have also non-linear relationship. Now, put it in econometric model or regression model, because the previous equation which I showed you, y, which is consumption, is beta 1 plus beta 2 x, where beta 2 is my MPC as per the economic laws, that as income increases, consumption will increase, and beta 1 is my autonomous consumption. That when income is 0, what is the level of my consumption is beta 1. This is a model which says that your consumption exclusively depends on, but in reality, consumption also is determined by other factor than income. Income could be the major determinant of consumption, but there could be other factors which may affect your income. Those are the factors like preferences, like population, like taste, like the prices of price level of the country, or income of the related other goods, or sorry, income of other people, price of related goods. A lot of other things will also affect consumption in addition to income. But while modeling it, while putting it in mathematical form, we have not considered those other variables which could affect consumption than income. And when we include those variables, the effect of these variables on consumption, I introduced this concept here, which actually in econometric terminology is many of you might, those who had econometrics might be knowing. And this econometric terminology is called the error term. So ultimately, we accepted this Keynesian consumption theory that consumption will depend on income. We also accepted that in addition to income, other factors or other variables like price level, the preferences, the taste, the price of related commodity, all other things also affect in consumption. And we do acknowledge that, introduce that in the equation, and that linear equation in the form of the error term. So remember, what is error term? Error term is, or is the error term in your econometric model, in your regression model, includes all other variables which are not included in the explanatory variable. In the specification, here, what y, which is consumption, is your dependent variable, x is the independent. Here, y is the dependent variable, x is the independent variable, is your income, and u is your error term, or is also another variable which affects your consumption. The past equation where your consumption is exclusively determined by income is called a deterministic relation or deterministic equation. What is it? It's a mathematical and deterministic relation that exclusively, if a specific value of income, you'll get specific value of consumption. But in the second one, the equation is a stochastic equation. In addition to consumption, so in addition to income, there are other variables which affect consumption. And since other variables are somehow having some impact on your consumption, but we're not considering in our estimation model, that's why for specific value of income, you may not have exact value of consumption. You'll get some average value of consumption. So this model, where your error term, this which includes other variables than your independent variables in the model, is called a stochastic model. The other relation was deterministic. This relationship is stochastic, meaning that thereby that for specific value of income, you may not get exact value of consumption. A consumption value may be something higher, lower. You may get exact, but it may be also higher or lower. That's why it's a stochastic relationship. So in any econometric analysis for two variable regression or multiple variable regressions, I have given you here the example of two variable. What first have the theory. From the theory, identify what is your dependent variable, what are your independent variables, then specify the functional relationship, then introduce this stochastic term. What is that? That it's a term that includes all other variables than your independent variable, which affects your dependent variable. Make the model stochastic, then obtain your data, get the data. So this is actually the process of any econometric process or any regression process. Get the data on personal consumption expenditure, get the data on the the income of the people. So this is the data actually. Of course, I've taken it probably from some net or something. It was prepared by one of my research scholars. So you get the data. X is your income and Y is the consumption. Okay. So now estimated, when you estimate actually in empirically you find that okay, this is the relation. The estimated relation is equal to minus 231.8. Actually, I'll tell you how to estimate it. Unfortunately, it's not possible to show it here. How to estimate? It could have been, you know, better actually. I do not have that board work at Chokwa. So when you estimate, let's say we found that beta 1 is minus 231.8 and beta 2 is 0.719 or almost 0.72. What does that mean? That if income increases by $1 or 1 rupee, it's of course this is an example of dollar. If income increases by $1 or 1 rupee, then consumption increases by 75 paise or 75 cent. That if for an individual, for the economy, the income increases by $1, then your consumption out of that $1, 72 cents will be spent by the. So here the MPC, marginal propensity to consume, as per the economic law, is 0.7. What I have said, what econometrics is? Econometrics is validation of laws, empirical validation of laws. For that, we should have law. Here we had this law of consumption. Did it, expressed it in mathematical form. Then we collected the information, collected the data, estimated the relationship. How this relationship is estimated, I'll show it in the next slide. So this is what actually, then the law had said that my MPC, marginal propensity to consume, is less than 1, meaning thereby that as income increases by 1 unit, the consumption will be less than 1 unit. That is what actually the idea is. You test, and what we found that the the coefficient of your income variable is 0.72. I'm sorry, 0.72, which justifies the relationship between income and consumption, which actually was initially postulated. That 72 cent is spent out of 1 rupees on consumption for any increase in the income by $1. This is what actually the idea is. Of course, other things which are done in econometrics, predictions and forecasting, I'm not going into. I'll summarize and take a pause here before I take certain questions. So, econometrics is using empirical data to validate, test an existing law, meaning thereby that you should have a law or a theory. That theory needs to, I've been telling repeatedly since I'm a student of economics, I have written economic theory. It could be any theory. It should have a theory. Then that theory should be expressed in mathematical form, where it could be a deterministic relationship between your dependent and independent variables. One, of course, you'll have one dependent variable. You can have multiple, of course, multiple regression. Yeah. Then express it in econometric formula or econometric econometric laws, where you introduce your error term, which is stochastic. What does that mean? The occurrence of that error term is probabilistic in nature. If the occurrence of that law is probabilistic in nature, then the occurrence of the dependent variable. Look at, if you recall the equation which I saw. One equation, the mathematical equation which I showed was y is equal to alpha, beta 1 plus beta 2x. that means we had not introduced the error term there. Well, that means in that expression where I had said y is equal to beta 1 plus beta 2x, I assume that y, which is my consumption, depends exclusively on income. That's why it's a deterministic model. So it's, now you need to first have what should be the deterministic model or the mathematical model. From there, introduce the stochastic model or the econometric model, introduce the error term. So in stochastic model, we wrote y is equal to beta 1 plus beta 2x plus the error term. And as I said, error term is your stochastic. Please, I do not know the composition of this class, but as just told, it's no combination of both different groups of students. What is stochastic? Stochastic means the occurrence of that error term or stochastic term is probabilistic in nature. It may be present, may not be present. In our hypothetical other term like prices of that commodity or prices of relative commodities, tastes and preferences may not affect consumption. In some cases, it may affect. That means the occurrence of the effect of that error term is probabilistic in nature. May occur, may not. And since it's stochastic, you may get the exact value, you may not get the exact value. But for a deterministic relation, you'll get exact value of y for given value of x. But for a stochastic relationship, you'll not get exact value of y for a given value of x because of the presence of the error term. So you look at that equation once again, this one. So y depends on x and u. Since u is error term which is stochastic, y automatically, since it depends on x and u, depends on u, u is also automatically stochastic. So the steps are like this. First, you should have the theory or the law, express the stochastic, the deterministic relation, express the stochastic relation, then you have to have the data. Because once you express that relationship, you have to have the data, estimate the model, then test whether whatever is said in the theory, is it correct or not. In our example, the theory said that as income increases, consumption will increase, but the increase in consumption is not exactly matched by the increase in income. That's why this, which is the change in consumption due to change in income, which is called the MPC, marginal propensity to consume, is less than 1. So we tested here. For our example, it turned out to be 0.72719 actually, which is which the theory predicts. So this is what actually the idea of it should have theory, identified independent variable or variables, dependent variable, then express the relationship, and then I estimate the relationship, then test what is theory says and what your data says. So if I conclude, your econometrics is empirical validation of existing laws. For me, as a student of economics, it's economic laws. For you, let's say, physics law. If a student in physics or student in biology, it could be the biological law. So get the data, test it actually econometrics. So I'll take a break. If I have question, friends, your question, I can take the question. Okay. So the process is like this. You should have theory, mathematical model, then have the econometric model, data collection. Any question, I can take a couple of questions. And just, am I audible actually to friends? Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Any question?
Actually, we have the session at the end. Maybe they can come one by one and seek clarification. I said because they have to come before a computer and then ask the question to you.
No, they can do
We have
it
some.
now. So actually, it will be better if I can clarify in between. If it's
Okay.
okay. If
Sure, sure.
anybody,
I'll ask them.
uh,
I'll ask them if they have
uh,
any questions so far. Anyone? Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir.
good afternoon, dear.
Sir, I want to know what is the difference between ordinary least square regression and quantile regression, and in case of quantile regression, how to interpret that model.
See, your quantile regression is also ordinary least square. Of course, I haven't gone to that. Ordinary least square is a technique. So if you see here, what did I say? That you express your dependent variable as a function of independent variable and your error term. So the idea is to get those coefficients, in my example, beta 1 and beta 2, by minimizing the total sum of the error. That's why
Yes.
when you're getting these coefficients, the technique which you are using is that, okay, when you convert your theory into a mathematical function or to a stochastic function, what do you assume? That in addition to your independent variable, there are other variables which are affecting. But in your model, you have not considered those other variables. Okay. Now, you get the value of beta 1 and beta 2 because by not considering those variables in the determination of the dependent variable, you are committing an error. That's why we call that those are as error term. So your target should be to get those coefficients beta 1 and beta 2 by minimizing this error. But what happens actually technically, when you minimize those errors, for each value you'll get an error. But unfortunately, if you try to get what could be the total error, then if you add it, that becomes zero. If you add those errors, actually, that will become zero. So the objective to minimize that error is not achieved. In order to have some idea about what could be the possible total error, and to get rid of this problem that, okay, if you sum these all these errors, that turns out to be zero. To get rid of that, instead of summing those error, you square those error, then get a summation. So when you square, then the negative terms actually are done away with. You get square each error, square each error, sum it up, then you get the total. Okay, so that will give, by summing the square of the error, that will give you an idea about what is the possible total error. That will give you what is the possible total error. Remember, as I said, I'm repeating once again, your idea is to minimize this error. Get there are different values of beta 1 and beta 2. You get those values of beta 1, beta 2 for which the errors are minimum. Errors are least. That's why it's called least square, ordinary least square. So you reach to that value of beta 1 and beta 2 by minimizing or by reaching to the list of your error. Remember why you have to come to the list of those error? Because by not considering those variables, you committed some mistakes. So your task should be to minimize those mistakes. That's why any coefficient actually, if which you know any coefficient which you are estimating should be estimated by minimizing. But in enter only if you have methods of movement, actually GMM, generalized method of movement, or MLE estimates, maximum likelihood estimators, where the likelihood function is maximized. In the both the cases, actually you'll get the same coefficient. But in all econometric exercises, whatever coefficients you get are called OLS coefficients. Why? Because by not considering those independent variables, you commit the error. In order to minimize this error, you have to find out some those variables or values of beta 1 and beta 2 that will take you to the least of the error. Okay, so that's why it's called OLS, or ordinary least square estimate. This is one part of your question. Second part is, you said, sir, what is quantile? But actually, as I said, for GMM and maximum likelihood, MLE, maximum likelihood estimators, where you maximize the likelihood function, or in any econometric exercise, the coefficients which you get are OLS. The coefficient which you get are OLS coefficient, regardless of what kind of regression you are using. But in quantile regression, actually, you that's a little higher version. Actually, the data set which you are empirically estimating, you know, remove some portion of the data, because at times what happens, your data which are extremes may have extreme data, let's say lower 25% or upper 25%. What happens in extreme data cases, you may have more volatility in the data. Of course, there are certain assumptions regarding the error. So in a quantile regression, you try to trim. It's actually you trim the extreme values, then get those regression coefficients. But remember, they are also the coefficients are OLS coefficients. They are also the OLS coefficients are. Remember, for any econometrics analysis, the coefficients should be reached at by minimal error. That's why coefficients will be called the OL. In a quantile regression, you trim the data so that the volatility, or because there are certain assumptions regarding the error term. The assumptions, of course, I'll come back to the next slide when we go there. I'll tell you assumptions like the variance should be constant. There should be less variance. There shouldn't be autocorrelation. It should be normally distributed. So if you have a higher data set where the volatility could be more, you can trim those, top 75 or bottom 75, only focus on the mid, 50% of the data. Then what happens? You can reduce the volatility or the variations or the heteroscedasticity. In that case, the coefficient in a quantile regression, the coefficients will be more consistent. Of course, there are different the properties will be more consistent, but still they are OLS. Still, they are OLS coefficients derived by or this ordinary least square. Was I able to clarify?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Any other question? If no more questions? If no question,
yes, you can proceed to the next section.
okay. So this is what actually the basic idea. So I'll go to the next. I don't. Okay, no questions. So I'll go to the next one. Next slide is. Is it visible? I just. Sir, Anjan sir, is it visible? The slides?
Yes, yes, it is
So
basic
this is
economic.
what actually we discussed. No. Yeah, this regression, which whether it is two variable regression or multiple regression, Actually, you will be characterizing the relationship between your dependent and independent variable. Remember, this is different from your correlation.
Sir, you are presenting basic econometric slide?
Yes.
Okay, fine. It is visible.
Regression, it shows the regression and how it is different from correlation. It's showing that or what?
No.
Or is it showing?
It is in the first slide. You are in the first slide of basic econometrics.
Yes, probably there's some mistake. Okay, let me there's something wrong. That regression equation, it's showing the regression equation? No.
No.
Okay. Very. I do not know. Okay, just a minute, sir. Of course. So it's is it visible, sir? Now, simple linear regression.
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Actually, there's some. Okay. Okay. So let me tell you. Actually, this regression analysis is different from your
Sir,
correlation. Hello.
yeah. It's done.
Huh.
I was
Huh.
to request you to go to slideshow mode.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's done. It's done.
Okay, fine. So it's different from the correlation, this regression. Actually, in a correlation analysis, you simply, see the co-movement of two variables. You do not assign some variable to be dependent, some to be independent. It's a simultaneous movement of two variables. But in a regression analysis, you find out the effect of one variable on the other variable. Thereby, you assign one variable to be dependent variable and other variables to be independent variables. So there is a distinct difference between these two, correlation and regression. Of course, in basic statistics at our undergraduate level, we are told that the geometric mean of the correlation regression coefficients are the A is the correlation coefficient, but that's shouldn't be misunderstood in this case. If you have a regression relation where y is dependent variable, x is independent variable, you need to adhere to that. That's called the functional specifications. Of course, the friend who asked this question probably must be having, others also could be having in this idea that there are certain assumptions before you know the assumptions regarding those variables and your modeling, and particularly for the error term, you in my regression analysis, based on which you can estimate your ordinary least square. So let's let's try to understand this two variable regressions. Then I'll go to the multiple variable regressions. I was doing this thing. This dotted lines, if we can see, I'll just use a pen. These dotted points, these dots are actually the actual relationship between x and y. The line, actually, this linear, the straight line, this straight line is the estimated line. And beta 1, of course, here the regression equations which is estimated, I was given as y is equal to beta naught plus beta 1 x. Beta 1 measures this slope, and beta naught measures the intercept. Intercept means the value of y when x is 0. When you bring this x to 0, then what is the value of y? This is actually beta naught is intercept. And beta 1 is the change in your dependent variable due to the change in the independent variable. This is what actually the linear relationship means. Okay, I think I am clear. If I have any doubt, I will also try to clarify. Okay, no, it's not going to. So it's not going. Uh, okay, next. Okay. As I said, actually, this regression coefficients beta naught and beta 1 are estimated with certain assumptions that this error term should be continuous. There are certain things. Actually, let me see what is the error. I'll go linear. As I have mentioned, this is what actually the linearity. So the relationship between two variable in a two variable regression model is y is a function of x, and you have the random error term. Then your regression line will fit exactly. Actually, it would have been better if you have gone for a physical class. Your exact relationship is given by the independent variable and the dependent variable, and the error term adds stochasticness to the. Just a minute. There are certain assumptions. Probably this part of my talk was a little hedgy. Once again, I repeat. Here, I showed how your correlation and regressions are different. Correlation, you will have only simultaneous movement of two variables. It doesn't have any variable which is dependent or any variable which is independent. It's a co-movement of two variables. In regression, you have dependent variable, independent variable. In addition to dependent variable and independent variable, you have your error variable or error term. The relationship, actually, we start with a linear relationship. The relationship will give you an intercept. Intercept means when your independent variable is 0, what will be the value of the dependent variable? That is actually your independent. And you will also get the slope, which measures actually in my previous example or previous PowerPoint, which measures the unit change in the dependent variable due to a unit change in the independent variable. Now, as one of our friend asked, sir, what is OLS? As I said, you need to estimate the value, such values of beta which will minimize the total error by not considering your some independent variables those would affect your dependent variable. You're committing certain error. So you should come out with such variable of values of beta 1 and beta 2 that will minimize the error. That will minimize the total. For that, you need to have certain assumptions. As I said, the first assumption, the relation could be nonlinear. Actually, we also do estimate nonlinear relationship between variables x and y or for the variable for y depending on multiple x's. Okay, in my example, in consumption depending on income, it can be consumption depending on income, consumption depending on income and prices, income or prices of related good, consumption depending on income, price of own good, price of related good, then the preferences of the consumer. So it's multiple variables. So if you have multiple variables, but then still the relationship between X and Y should be linear. Actually start with, we can do with non-linear relation. It's assumed that your error term, the assumption here is the error term, the U actually should be normally distributed. What does that mean? Normally distributed. A more normal distribution error term means the error term will have a zero mean and a constant variance. It should be no mesochotic. It should not be positively or negatively skewed. It should be a bell-shaped curve. So the relationship between your dependent and independent variables should be linear. Your error term is stochastic. Therefore, your dependent variable y is also stochastic. So error term is normally distributed since error term affects the dependent variable. Your dependent variable is also stochastic and it is also assumed to be normally distributed. If you do not have normal distribution of the error term, you cannot have hypothesis testing. Of course, that's beyond the scope of this class. But then, what does that require? If you have a normally distributed error term, that will ensure a normal distribution of your what you call y variable. That will also ensure the distribution of your beta coefficients, normal distribution of the beta coefficient. That will help you in identifying, help you in hypothesis testing whether the coefficients which you have derived are significant or not. So the relationship should be linear. Then your y should be normally distributed. Remember, it stems from these assumptions that your error terms are normally distributed. And the variance, actually one of our friend was asking variance of the error term for each value of X should be constant. It's called homoscedasticity. This is called homoscedasticity. Well, okay. So this actually the variance should be constant for all those variables. Actually, I do not have the this opportunity to show it here, but then the variance should be. The other assumptions, I do not know whether I have mentioned it here or not. So its variance should be constant, meaning thereby that for each value of X, you'll have multiple values of Y, but the variation in that Y should be constant. Okay. Although if your variances are different for different values of X, then your errors, your coefficients, or you may get OLS, which will which you will definitely be able to get, but that OLS may not be reliable. The coefficients which you get, beta 1 and beta 2, which you get, may not be reliable. Remember, the OLS coefficients which you derive should follow certain properties, basically blue properties. It should be based linear unbiased estimator. You may get unbiased estimator. If the variance are not constant, then your coefficient may not be best. Best means the variance should be minimum. Okay. Now, of course, this is what actually I have tried to explain the relationship between X and Y, the relationship between the dependent variable and the independent variable. I do not know over. The other assumptions are the error terms should be normally distributed. Mean of the error term will be 0, and the variance is constant, and variance should not be serially correlated. I do not know whether I marked those other coefficients or not. No, sorry, other other what you call assumptions of this error term, whether I marked it or not. Okay. Now, if you look at this regression picture, it will give you an idea that what do we know, what do we do. Please understand this. Under those assumptions that your error term is normal, your what you call dependent variable is normal, x is not stochastic, or the independent variables are not stochastic. The variance should be constant, and the variance should not be serially correlated. Under those assumptions, when you minimize those total error and get those coefficients of that regression line, those coefficients will give you OLS, that ordinary least square coefficient, which where the you can get the total minimum of all those minimum of all those error terms. Then what does it do? Actually, in your regression analysis, you have this dependent variable. It tries to find out that in the dependent variable there is a variation. You have the independent variable. In the independent variable there is a variation, and you have the error variable. In the error variable you have a variation. In the regression analysis, we try to find out, or we try to explain the variation, total variation in the dependent variable. How it is explained by the variation in the independent variable or variables and the error variables. The total variation in the dependent variable is decomposed into the variation in the independent variables and the variation in the error term. This is what actually total, it's the thing which our friend, like those who have econometrics, they might have understood. What? Once again, I am repeating. In the regression analysis, unlike correlation, what we do is we accept that there is a variation in the dependent variable, and that variation is due to the independent variable. So we try to match the variation in the dependent variable with the variation in the independent variable. We try to see that the variation, try to ensure that the variation in the dependent variable is explained by the variation in the independent. However, since there are other error variable which could also affect the dependent variable, the variation in the error variable also contributes towards the variation in dependent variable. So here you have this equation. Also, you have this equation. I'll see you so point with pointer option. You can see this actually. This is the total variation in the dependent variable. If y is my dependent variable, then this will measure the total variation in the dependent variable. This one will measure the total variation due to the independent variable. And this one measures the variation due to the error term. So in a regression analysis, when you estimate those coefficients to OLS, what we do, we try to establish a relation where you say that there is a variation in the dependent variable, and that variation can be explained due to the variation in the independent variable and variation in the error term. So now, intuitively, if you look at, okay, we'll go to the next. Okay, so intuitively, it shows actually that if just intuitively what it shows that if we have more independent variables, then those variation in the dependent variable explained by the independent variable will be, once again I repeat, in a regression analysis we try to relate that the explanation or the variation in the dependent variable could be explained. Let's say I give you the example of temperature. Say temperature in Berhampur city, last 30 years temperature. The temperature should be same. But when you see that since last 30 years, every year the average temperature has been changing, there is a variation. Then we try to relate this temperature variation in Berhampur city with the population of Berhampur city. Let's say last 30 years, what has been the population of Berhampur city? If the population is same and the temperature is same, then actually we say that the variation in temperature is not explained by the variation in population. But if you see that there is a variation in the temperature in Berhampur city, there is a variation in the population of the Berhampur city since last 30 years, then we assume that probably there could be some association. I'm not saying causation. There could be some association between these two variations. That variation in the temperature of Berhampur city is somehow associated with the variation in the population in Berhampur city in the last 30 years. Okay. In addition, so then we say that okay, probably this increase in temperature or increase in population in Berhampur city would be associated with the increase in the temperature in the Berhampur city. But in addition to the population, that is your independent variable, there could be other variables which could affect the temperature in Berhampur city, like afforestation or deforestations, the industrializations, other things actually which may affect the temperature in Berhampur city. If not considered, they are embodied in the error. Okay, so the objective for any regression analysis, we estimate those coefficients, betas, and everything, and it's to the analysis. But the objective of any regression analysis should be to see through that the explained variation. What is explained variation? Variation in the dependent variable, which is explained by the variation in the independent variable. That's called the explained variation. Should be as much as possible. And that is called your R square, actually, coefficient of determination. What it is? It shows you the total percentage of variation in the dependent variable, which is explained by the independent variable. If it's R square, coefficient of determination, let's say it is 0.89, that means 89% of the variation in the dependent variable is explained by the independent variable. In my hypothetical example of the temperature in Berhampur University and the population in Berhampur University, Berhampur since last 30 years, let's say I find that R square is 0.85 or 89. It means 89% of the variation in the temperature in Berhampur city is explained by this population in the Berhampur city in the last 30 years. Rest 11% is explained by this unaccounted for error term. So as a researcher, our objective should be to see through that this explained variation, which is the percentage of variation in the dependent variable due to independent variable, should be as much as possible. Okay, so actually this R-square value could lie between 0 to 1. If nothing, which is your dependent variable, independent variable doesn't have any bearing, any association with the dependent variable, then your R-square will be 0. And if your dependent variable or variables explain the relationship or the variation in the dependent variable fully, then your R square will be 1. In that case, your model is a deterministic model, like mathematical model. The other example in my other slide, which I showed, that y is equal to beta 1 plus beta 2x. You do not have the presence of the error term to explain any non-variations. So, but in reality, the variation in the dependent variable is explained by the independent variable, also with other independent or other variables which you might not have considered. So intuitively, R square, which is a coefficient of determination that determines the percentage of variation in the dependent variable due to the independent variable, can be improved by adding further independent variable. let's say you have only one independent variable, and let's now my hypothetical example of temperature in Berhampur city and population in Berhampur city. You will, let's say, add the number of trees in Berhampur city since last 30 years. Probably the R square will be more. So a coefficient of a determination which explains the total variation in the dependent variable due to the variation in the independent variables could be more or could be raised by adding more independent variables into the regression model. Okay, but then when you add more variable into the regression model, that becomes actually your multiple regression. Till now we're discussing, I told you, of course, we haven't derived anything. I told you the two variable regression model where only one variable, let's say in my example, the population will explain the temperature. But if you add afforestations, urbanizations, and other thing, industrialization, other thing, that will also explain the temperature in Berhampur city, or variation in the temperature in the Berhampur city. Probably the R square will be. Meaning that I'll summarize. If you add more explanatory variable or more independent variable in a regression model, that may include the explanatory power of your model, which is your coefficient of regression. In that case, researchers at times are tempted to add more explanatory variables in the independent variable, in the list of independent variables, to increase the deterministic power of your model, or to increase the what you call the explanatory power of the model, R square, or coefficient of determinants. But by adding so, you may got another problem. That problem is called multipolarity. And there is another, there is another assumptions regarding this adding of other or more explanatory variable in the regression analysis. In addition to those assumptions that your error terms will be normally distributed, you should have a zero mean, constant variance. The variance should not be serially correlated. Functional forms should be correctly specified. In addition to that, when you are dealing with a multiple regression technique, by virtue of which you are adding more explanatory variable into the regression framework, then you have this other assumptions that the variables or independent variables should not be correlated. The independent variables should not be correlated. This is called the problem of multipolarity. If these independent variables are correlated, then the individual effect of each of the independent variable on the dependent variable may not be possible. But by adding more independent variable, probably you may be able to increase the coefficient of determination of your model. But then you may run into another problem of multiple. We'll discuss that if time permits. But then how these are estimated? These slope coefficients and the intercept coefficient for a two variable regression model are estimated. First, get the idea about what should be the total total error, then minimize it with respect to beta and alpha, get this home. So I do not have this thing beta hat. Actually, I have written here. You can see this is beta word for x. Beta hat is the slope for a two variable regression model. Beta hat is the slope. And it is summation x into y divided by summation x square. What is x? X is x minus x bar. Y is y minus y bar. And your alpha hat is, or your intercept coefficient. I have here it is written alpha hat. Actually, I had written beta now. Is y bar minus beta hat x. So you can get these coefficients and interpret like this. But if you have multiple independent variables, then you can estimate. Of course, I could have shown you, but unfortunately, uh, because of my lack of preparation or whatever you may call, I couldn't show you. I can, if time permits, at some other day, actually, I'll visit and I'll show you how to interpret these coefficients and how to estimate these coefficients with statistics. So this is how actually you need to estimate this your coefficient. And if you have multiple regressions, more than one independent variable, then the multiple regression, oh sorry, in the multiple regression you will have multiple what you call independent variables. In that case, you have one additional assumption that the independent variables should not be interrelated. Of course, uh, uh, of course, if they are perfectly correlated, such in my hypothetical example, the temperature in Berhampur city depends on the population of Berhampur city, depends on the forestations and other things. If these independent variables are perfectly correlated, you may not be able to estimate the may not be able to estimate the coefficients. But if they are not perfectly correlated, you may be able to estimate the coefficients. You will be able to estimate the coefficient, but they still will be blue, but they will not be consistent. They will not be consistent, meaning thereby your coefficients may not be significant. Of course, this technical terminology which I'm speaking without being physically present here. But then, if the independent variables are perfectly related, it takes it this way that you're not able to find out the coefficients. If they are not perfectly correlated, you will be able to find out the coefficients, you will be able to find out the OLS coefficients, but those coefficients will not be consistent, meaning thereby they may not be significant. The other problem for a multiple regression function is that may increase your R-square coefficient of determination, but it may be very difficult if they're interrelated or correlated. It will be very difficult to interpret each of these coefficients individually. Let's say in my example, as I said, no population is related to afforestation. So if you have a regression line where it's a temperature in Berhampur city depends on population in Berhampur city, depends on forestation in Berhampur city, depends on the extent of urbanization of Berhampur city. If population and forestation are interrelated, then the coefficient of population cannot independently say that, okay, with the increase of population by 1 unit, the temperature will increase by this unit, because increase in population is related to the increase in the afforestations or deforestations or urbanization. So if they are interrelated, then even if you are able to calculate the coefficients, interpreting those coefficients may be really difficult. So in a multiple regressions, that's the risk which you may run into. That one advantage is you may increase the determination power or the coefficient of determination of your regression of your model. But the other problem is, if the independent variables are perfectly correlated, then you may not be able to estimate the coefficients. If they are not perfectly correlated, you may be able to estimate those coefficients, but interpreting individual coefficients may be erroneous. In that case, actually, there is a concept called, uh, because these independent variables will be somehow interrelated. Then what is the extent of that relation which you will accept? It's called the tolerance value or the variance inflation factor. That will decide what is the extent of correlation between the independent variable which you accept to estimate the regression function. Okay, so you need to check that tolerance variance inflation VIF, it's called VIF of each factor should be less than 10. Then only you can use those variables in the regression model. Unfortunately, I do not have have the software or the data to estimate. Really sorry, Anjan sir, I know, otherwise I would have shown you how to estimate those VIF and interpret. So to summarize, I can say you use the OLS technique to estimate whether it is two variable regression model or multiple regression model. Those OLS coefficients will be best linear unbiased estimator under those assumptions that your mean of the error term is 0. It's normally distributed. The independent variable is non-stochastic. Dependent variable is stochastic. The variance is constant. Variance are not related. So if you increase the number of explanatory variable, or meaning why you go for a multiple regression model, you may increase the predictive power of your model or deterministic power of your model by virtue of increasing the coefficient of determination. But by doing so, you may run into another problem, which is seen in a multiple regression. Remember, this problem of multicollinearity is not seen in a two variable regression. You'll have problem of multicollinearity if you have more than one independent variable. Okay, so if you have more than one independent variables and you are into multiple regression model, you may increase the coefficient of determination, but you may run into this problem of multicollinearity where the independent variables could be correlated. In that case, if they are perfectly correlated, you're not able to estimate. You will not be able to estimate those coefficients. But if they are not perfectly correlated, you can estimate. But then in that case, interpreting the individual coefficients will be difficult. So you have to have some sort of what is the level of correlation between the independent variable which you will be accepting. It's called the tolerance level, tolerance value. Or it's calculated from a concept called variance inflation, VIF, variance inflation factor. For any independent variable, you drop that variable or do something about that. Of course, there are all the solutions to it. It's really difficult on my part to complete it in a single classroom. But then, as an applied econometrician for a multiple regression analysis, what you need to do, you need to check the VIF of each of the variable. If some of the variables have VIF more than 10, you do some treatment about it. Particularly generally we drop it. Okay, so that's what the basic thing. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it actually. But I can take the couple of all the other questions from this session. Sir, actually, Anjan sir, I'm sorry, I made it through. I can take a couple of questions now. Then we can. Anjan sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think I need to stop here. I can take a couple of questions. It would have been better actually to show the students practically, but unfortunately, as you know, owing to my health condition, I'm not also able to speak also.
Yes, sir. I mean, we greatly appreciate the participants who remained till end of the last talk of the session. For your information, he was suffering from viral fever, not yet out of it, haven't joined office, but still he agreed, honored our request and agreed to conduct, because he was to here physically to conduct 4 sessions, like 2 here and 2 the other side. And he could not recover, still he agreed to conduct at least 1 session, because I never wanted to miss his lecture at least. So that's the kind of importance that I assume as far as Professor Dukhabandhu's house deliberations are concerned. And the floor is open now, virtual floor. You can come here, get your doubts cleared. I'm sure.
Anything on econometrics, sir. Anjan sir, any questions on econometrics?
Yes. I'm sure this talk is really has substantiated your understanding than what you have learned yesterday, right? Both theory and in practice. So you are free, come forward and interact with him, get your doubts clear. Yeah, come.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, actually, I
Good
want to know
afternoon,
which
dear.
model of econometrics. Yes, sir. Sir, actually,
Econometrics.
that which model of econometrics I will apply to find out structural impact or find out structural impact.
Structural impact means actually there is a shift from one structure to another structure. Dummy variable will do actually. Of course, I haven't covered dummy variable here. So let's say for let's
Actually, I wanted to find out structural impact of inflation and exchange rate. Sir, actually, I want to
here you're not
structural
audible.
impact of inflation and exchange rate returns. Sir, am I audible?
Now it's audible. Could you please repeat your question, dear?
Sir, actually, I want to find out structural impact of inflation and exchange rate on stock market returns. Then, sir, which model I
See,
for it?
structural. If you want to say actually, if I understood like this,
Yes, sir.
that your inflation has a particular pattern and
Yes,
it
sir.
has a structural pattern. Like actually, uh, like let's say it's inflation was certain level, then it has gone up, gone down, something like that. Exchange rate also has certain pattern. How these
Yes, sir.
patterns have effect on the stock market?
Stock market returns.
Stock. Actually, I'll tell you the best models will be your E-GARCH or something, exponential GARCH,
Yes, sir.
E-GARCH, Arch GARCH and E-GARCH. Actually, E-GARCH will be exponential GARCH model, generalized autoregressive conditional heteroscedasticity model. Those models will be more appropriate for high frequency data because stock market data, your data is no daily data or weekly. What kind of data you are having?
I took monthly.
Monthly, but for how many months?
Sir, actually 2012 to up to till now.
So let's say for the year 12 means it's some 150, but still it's high frequency data. For high
Yes, sir.
frequency data, an EGARS model, it's a specific time series econometrics is more appropriate than this classical econometrics. So it will be specific time series econometric. In fact, ANN also will do artificial neural network models for forecasting. If you want to forecast and find out ANN, artificial neural
Yes,
network model or EGARS model
yes,
will be more appropriate model to estimate or find out the structural impact of your inflation and exchange rate on. So NN is good.
yes, sir.
NN actually can. EGARS is also good, but then actually because EGARS arch model or EGARS model they may model volatility, and since these high frequency data have more, in fact, uh, the wavelet is also wavelet
Wavelet.
analysis. You've done a wavelet?
We find about wavelet model also. This,
Wavelet. No, have you done that?
no, sir. I just working on it. Sir,
Okay,
actually, I
actually,
want
it will
but
actually the relation is given in a cos and sine. Actually, will do or wavelet
yes, sir.
will do.
Sir, wavelet.
Pardon, dear. Wavelet
Sir.
percent in doing wavelet.
Yes, sir.
Are you conversant in doing wavelet?
No, sir. I am working on it. Actually, sir, I first collected my data. Then I am going for model. Sir, actually, can you suggest best model for it?
Actually, see, it depends on the data. As I said, no, you test with all three, EGARS, NN, and wavelet. See which one actually does the best prediction, best analysis.
Thank you, sir.
So there are some diagnostic tests. You based on the diagnostic test, you can find out which one is. But since you're doing wavelet is also good.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank, thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Sir, so thank you so much
Thank you, sir.
for making it happen in spite of your health not supporting for a
Thank
lengthy
you, sir.
discussion.
In fact,
It's still,
to be very honest, actually, I was sleeping. I thought actually it's terminated. Actually, then my wife said that Ranjan sir has called. Oh, I was sleeping. Then
Yes, sir.
I didn't get this thing. Thank you for yeah.
Sir,
I beg
I
apology. Probably there could be some mismatch, but I beg apology for this.
no, sir, nothing like that because I'm a pakka businessman. Day before when you said you're coughing and fever, it is little improving. I thought I must get at least one session of yours.
Thank you,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. Thank you so much. But we look forward to your physical presence in the
Yes,
campus.
definitely. See, actually, next week I'm going to London. Actually,
Yeah.
so once I'm back from there, regardless of the program, I'll simply drop in at your place. Definitely, I'll
Oh,
simply drop in
great,
and take a couple of classes there.
yeah. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.